Casto,
Here.
John Windsor,
Here.
Terry Casto, David Lane, David Lane has asked to be excused. Laura Lee Thompson,
Here.
Stephanie Ely, Courtney Barker, Todd Swingle, Jay Moynihan,
Present.
Dennis Basile, Kimberly Newton. We have a quorum.
Here.
Thank you. Anthony, if you're available, could you read the statement about the public participation and how the meeting runs on Zoom?
Yes.
Thank you.
For information, as we adjust to online meetings, I want to share the following logistical information. Please note, this meeting is being recorded. All attendees are muted and must be unmuted in order to be heard. Attendees will remain muted until specific moments on the agenda when public comment is accepted. Members of the public who wish to give public comment will be unmuted to speak one at a time before each business item is voted on by the members of the Citizen Oversight Committee, and again at the end of the meeting during general public comment period. To indicate that you want to speak on a specific agenda item, use the Zoom raise hand tool when the meeting gets to that agenda item. For those participating via computer, attendees will see a raise hand tool at the bottom of their screen, and participants will need to select the participant's icon at the bottom of the screen. The raise hand tool is an icon at the bottom of the participant's window. For those participating via phone, dial *9. The meeting host will see a list of everyone who wants to speak and will unmute and call on those individuals one at a time. Please state your name and residence. You will have 3 minutes to speak. A timer will sound at the end of your allotted time, and the next speaker will be called on and unmuted for the 3-minute window. This process of raising hands and accepting public comment will be repeated before each business item is voted on, and again at the end of the meeting during the general public comment period. Instructions for hand raising will be repeated when it's time to hear public comment.
Thank you, Anthony. Could I get a motion to approve the agenda, please?
So moved.
Vinny moves, a second.
Charlie, I'll second.
Second, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Could I get a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Laura Lee seconds.
Okay. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Motion passes unanimously. We're going to move on to progress and fiscal reports. And if we could hold off questions on Virginia's report until she gets to the end of the report, I think it gets kind of clunky trying to go through her whole report and then jumping back and forth with questions that she may be answering in just a second or two. So let's let her go, and then we'll ask questions when she's finished, okay?
Chair Windsor, this is Lorraine Koss. I've joined the call.
Hi.
Sorry for cutting this.
No
late.
problem. Virginia, are you ready to take over?
Yep, just checking in, Lorraine. Okay, good morning. Starting at the top of the list, we did follow-up inspections of the fertilizer store signage, and there were only 2 stores that were remaining out of compliance. The challenge with them is we're now out of signs. One of them dropped by our office to try to pick up signs, not understanding that the reason we didn't drop off signs when we came was because we were out of signs. So we will be working on that. I wanted to give a shout out to Palm Bay. They've broken ground on the Palm Bay water reclamation facility upgrade. So we're really looking forward to the improvements that will come with that project. The septic upgrades, there are kind of 2 varieties of septic upgrades going on right now. There's the innovative septic drain fields that we talked about last time. We've installed 6 of those, and we'll be monitoring those for a year. We also have 6 septic upgrades that have been completed by homeowners who have now filed reimbursements, and those we've been working with finance on all the paperwork that we need to actually reimburse the owners for those projects and have been working out the kinks on that. In addition to 154 applications for additional sites to be upgraded by their owners. The Brevard Zoo built another 2,700 square feet of oyster bars down in Melbourne Beach along Riverside Drive. And UCF in their monitoring went to a site that was constructed 2 years ago, and it now has in the bags that they sampled 66 oysters per bag on average, whereas it started out with 25 live garden oysters per bag. So the site has more than doubled. It's been there 2 years, so long enough for all the various seasons of low DO and all the predators have found it by now, and so we're super excited that 2 years into the project, that site is doing so well. There's recruitments of all different age structures in the reef, so good life table distribution there. New project funding applications. We provided a tidbit here in the report that 24 received. So those projects total a little over $6 million. Some of them are replacements or revisions to previous projects. So only about $3.3 million would be potentially new dollars. And the oyster projects, we already have funding allocated for oyster bars. So this is just assigning specific sites. So when you look at, what is really new that would replace something where it's not a whole lot, it's probably less than 2 million. So your decision challenge for November for the next meeting is not going to be nearly as difficult as what I was concerned it might be. So we're still going through those applications, vetting them, making sure that everything in there is accurate and what you should have for decision-making process, and trying to figure out, how best to show if you want to fund this new project, what would you have to give up? We will also be updating the revenue projections for next month, so you have a better feel for, how many dollars are available. So that's just a little introduction of what's to come for November. We had our pre-qualification meeting for the 2 plumbing contractors that submitted to be able to be paid directly by the county to do repair work and connections for homeowners. And they were both qualified earlier this week. And we are going to work with purchasing to re-advertise to try to recruit some more plumbers, so we have a bigger, more competitive pool. But both of these first 2 plumbers have been qualified, and they seemed like they were going to be super to work with. So we're excited about being able to roll out that opportunity for the public. And anticipating that a lot of people will want to participate, we are working on an online grant application portal to try to streamline the process for everybody. The last meeting, the committee talked about coming up with a prorated grant system for septic owners who weren't in that, top priority bracket. And so in order to offer that program, we need the loading estimates for all of the septic systems. And we have had a number of parcels that were mapped as on sewer, but turned out they weren't really on sewer. They weren't really connected to sewer. They were still on septic, and they were not previously modeled. So we have now engaged a consultant to model every parcel in the county as if it were on septic, whether we think it's on septic or not. So we will have that tool available to support that prorated grant option that you've directed us to draft language to put into the next annual plan update. We have 4 stormwater basins that are under construction right now in the north end of the county and the central part of the county. The dredging is still active, going well at the Grand Canal project. The zoo is currently constructing about 2,000 square feet of oyster bar along Dragon Point, and Crystal is feverishly busy closing out the last fiscal year and opening purchase orders for the new fiscal year. And on the other side of the one-page report, just wanted to highlight 2 events coming up in November. There's a Lagoon Loyal event that's being hosted at Boaters Exchange all day on November 7th. And the following weekend, November 14th, Melbourne is having their Indian River Lagoon Day at Front Street Park. And that's my report, Mr. Chair.
Okay, did anybody have any questions for Virginia about her report?
Yes, this is Lorraine Koss.
Yeah, and if you could hold your hands up, Lorraine, go ahead, but others who want to get in queue, go ahead and put your hands up. Go ahead, Lorraine.
I just wanted to ask when Virginia thought the tool would be available. What's the anticipated completion of that modeling?
I'm not sure. I know that we were trying to have it ready in time for the plan update, which wouldn't be until February. So it might be sooner, but.
Yeah,
Okay, great.
around November.
Thank you, Anthony.
Okay, any other questions? If not, we can move on to Crystal. Crystal, are you ready?
Yes, sir, I am. All right. All right, so as you can see, we have received our revenue, and it was 3.4 million. We are on projection to receive our projections this year, no effect by COVID, thank goodness. And our current cumulative expenditures are at 15.9 million. And I believe that is all I have for you today.
Okay, Vinny, have you got a question?
Yeah, Crystal, I think the little COVID icon disappeared on that latest one, didn't? Is that
Yes,
correct?
sir, it did.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to mention, I'm not certain it has any bearing going forward, but I just wanted to make sure my eyesight was clear, and I was missing the COVID sign. So thank you, Crystal.
Absolutely, it has been removed because in just one more collection of revenue, we will exceed that projection.
Thank
Okay,
you.
great. Anybody else with questions for Crystal? Okay, thank you, Crystal. Okay, we'll move on to other reports and special presentations. The first is Dolphins of the Indian River Lagoon by Megan Stolen. And then she's going to follow up with The Fast and the Furriest. And then after that, Gary Zarillo will be up. So Megan?
John, I think Jay had a question. He just hit the raise hand button late.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
Okay, Jay, go ahead. Jay, you have to unmute yourself.
Slow on the buttons there. No, Crystal, I just wanted to go back to the, you said that we've only spent 15 something million. I mean, we've actually like paid out $15 million so far.
Cumulative over the course of the beginning of the plan.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to clarify. Cumulative. Wow, that's it's
For
amazing.
this year, we are at, in rising, 7.4 million in this current fiscal year of FY20.
So almost half of what's been spent cumulatively has actually been, or has been paid out, I should say, has been paid out in this year.
Correct, sir?
Yeah, so I keep cautioning staff every time we give that number of what's been spent to also talk about the dollars that are in contract, that are, in projects that are in the works, and the cumulative,
Right.
the total cost of those projects once they are completed totals over 200 million. I think it's about 216, 218 million. And so, even though what has been paid out is a relatively small number, the number of projects that are moving forward, if we had to make all the payments for them right now, we would not have enough money in the bank to do so. So
Right.
there's a lag between when projects start and when they're completed and when they're paid.
Yes, and obviously a pretty big lag.
Yeah.
Which is fine. I mean, I understand that. And that's, so we've collected about 177 and, or no, I'm sorry. Looking at the wrong number on the chart. Well, whatever,
164.
167. And we owe 218. But anyway, okay, that's good. All right. Well, thank you, Virginia. That helps put everything in perspective. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else with any questions for Crystal before I close it off? Okay, it's closed. Let's move on to other reports and presentations. And Megan Stolen, are you there?
I saw Megan. She's muted and her video's off. So Megan, let us know if you're having any issues sharing your screen. I do have your presentations open if you need me to do that for you.
Okay. Okay, how's that?
Looks great.
Yay. Okay, I'm gonna turn my phone off because it's gonna ring, I'm sure, in the middle of this.
And if you can speak up.
Okay, is that better?
Yes, thank you, Megan.
Okay, so Virginia asked me to give an update on some of the dolphin work we've been doing and some of the otter work we've been doing, and they kind of go together. So it's nice to be able to tell you about both of them. I want to thank Virginia. She's been asking me to do this for a while, and I've been putting her off for various reasons. And then at the last minute last night, I gave her my talk. And so I apologize for being such a procrastinator. So the first talk I'm going to give today is on the dolphins of the IRL, and specifically how we see them as sentinels of the estuary health. So Indian River, Lagoon, bottlenose dolphins are considered residents. They are a separate stock managed by National Marine Fisheries Service. So you can think of this very similarly to a fish stock in that the federal government monitors each stock specifically as a separate population. So they have their own PBR, they have their own abundance estimate, that sort of thing. So Indian River Lagoon dolphins are considered a separate stock. Our best estimates, based on a couple of different studies that we've done, show that there are somewhere around 1,000 individual dolphins in the lagoon. So that number is based on both aerial surveys that we flew for about 8 years, and also a more recent boat-based abundance estimate that we did, and that paper is coming out in the next couple of months. So they were remarkably similar. So we feel pretty confident that the population is about 1,000 individuals. Some of the dolphins are transient, meaning that they move in and out of the lagoon. But we think that is relatively rare. And when they do it, we think it is mostly temporary. So we have dolphins that will exit through an inlet and hang out in the ocean for a little bit and then come back in. So we do consider this a resident population, and most of that is based on photo identification studies and freeze branding studies that have been done for, 40 years or so. Unfortunately, the bad news is this stock itself has seen multiple mortality events. We had one in 2001, 2008, 2013, and then we kind of shared an unusual mortality event with the oceanside dolphins in 2014 as well. So they've had a couple of these big die-offs, and they get a lot of press, and there's a lot of pressure to figure out what's killing them. Threats to the population include habitat loss, contaminant exposure, infectious disease, and prey availability issues. So we recently completed a project funded by the National Estuary Program to look at both dolphins and otters in the lagoon as sentinels for estuary health. And the goal of the dolphin project was to compile the mortality trends over the last 15 years or so, to look at foraging ecology, the health of the dolphins themselves, so the body condition, disease and trauma associated conditions, and also to do some heavy metal contaminant work. And we focus mostly on mercury because we know that's one of the big issues for dolphins, and is an issue in the lagoon. So this is the yearly mortality graph. This represents 717 dolphins since 2002, the mean mortality. And this is, of course, the minimum mortality, because we don't find all of the dolphins that die in the lagoon, but the mean minimum is around 42 animals per year. And you can see the red asterisks denote those unusual mortality events. And I should say that unusual mortality events is a legal definition under the Marine Mammal Protection Act. It's a national designation. So once you suspect that you have something going on that is a population-wide epidemic or die-off, we are required to submit those data to the National Marine Fisheries Service, and then they look at it with a team of experts and decide that something unusual is going on. So the male-female ratio is about 56 to 43%. So males are more common in the dead population, if you will, than females. We're not quite sure why this is. We would expect a 1-to-1 sex ratio at birth. So this means that males may be at more risk than females, which isn't uncommon for mammal species in general. This is the seasonal dolphin mortality. So as you can see, summer is our busy month. It's kind of a misnomer to talk about 4 seasons in Florida. It's usually like hot, So we divided these into categories based primarily on sort of wet season and ambient temperature and that sort of thing. But summer is definitely a bad time for dolphins. And we suspect, and I'll talk about some of the health data a little bit, but we suspect that this is probably because the lagoon is fairly shallow. The water actually gets to, you know, a fairly high temperature in most of the shallow areas, at least. And dolphins can only dump so much heat because they're encased in blubber. So we feel pretty strongly, and there's some evidence from Sarasota Bay on dolphins in that system over there, that dolphins have difficulty dumping heat. And so they are probably stressed physiologically in the summertime, and it just compounds maybe some underlying conditions or problems that they're having. So it seems to be the rough time to be a dolphin in those hot months in the lagoon. This pie chart shows you the cause of death in 359 dolphins over that time period. So we don't have cause of death for every dolphin because many of them are decomposed or we don't actually get hands on them. So we can't say for sure what killed all of those 717, but we have a pretty good subsample. So we have 359. You can see that trauma and infectious disease are significant causes of death for IRL dolphins. Trauma can be anything from a boat strike to fishing entanglement, but it also includes natural trauma. So that might be a stingray barb trauma, or something, you know, kind of weird. Most of that trauma, though, is anthropogenic. So it's primarily fishing gear interactions. But what I also like to point out is that non-fatal injuries are not represented in this graph. So that might be, for example, this dolphin on the right-hand side with the fishing line around its dorsal fin, that most likely would not kill that dolphin. It would sever the top part of the fin, but it may create issues for that dolphin long-term, and certainly in the short term while it's recovering, it may be more susceptible to issues. So it's always important to remember that sublethal disease and sublethal trauma may affect dolphins over the long term when it comes to their reproductive output, for example. So one of the big things that we found during die-off years, which is consistent across all die-off years, is that we find a lot of dolphins in very, very bad body condition to the point that they are emaciated. And emaciation is sort of the last step in the cascade of events that can kill a dolphin. So you don't generally come back from emaciation. And emaciation is actually the cause of death in a number of these animals. So this picture on the right shows you body condition for 3 different individuals. The one at the bottom is in good body condition. The one in the middle is in moderate body condition. And then the dolphin on the top is emaciated. And what we did was we wanted to see what the issue, well, we wanted to see if emaciation was unique to the die-off years. So Wendy, my co-author and co-team member, she conducts photo identification surveys for dolphins in the lagoon. And during the die-off in 2013, she was out in a boat taking pictures of the dolphins during the die-off. And then in 2016, 2017, she got some funds to do this large, robust design, population estimate, and using mark recapture and photo identification. And she, as part of this study, looked at the body condition of the animals during the unusual mortality event, and then those dolphins that survived and were living in 2016 and 2017, and compared the body condition to in that time period too. And what she found was that the majority of IRL dolphins are underweight, both during the die-off events and between them. So we've got dolphins in the lagoon, at least over the last 10 or so years at least, basically living at the edge of their body condition and physiological condition. The dolphins here are thinner than they should be, than we would expect them to be. And they are thinner than dolphins in places like Sarasota Bay. So we also looked at mercury levels. We did a study about, I think it was about 10 years ago, and we found high levels of mercury in those animals. And so we repeated the experiment with animals again in the last 10 years. And our results, we looked at liver and kidney both. The liver is the top slide here, or the top graph, and the kidney is in the bottom. And our results demonstrated some of the highest mercury levels in liver ever recorded for this species. So the max of one dolphin was 363 micrograms per gram of wet weight. And that's just extremely, extremely high. So much so that the folks that did a follow-up to this actually had to go back and check their instruments to make sure they were working properly, because they couldn't believe that they were getting the levels that they got. Let me show you this one. This is mercury levels by water basin. So what this shows us is basically that, at least statistically, there's really no difference between dolphins' mercury levels in the Banana River, Mosquito Lagoon, the Northern Indian River, and the North Central Indian River, which covers our stranding area. So, but we know that dolphins travel, pretty long distances. So this isn't super surprising, because we think the animals are moving around a lot. They don't really have super tight home ranges for the most part. So you wouldn't expect really tight data for this as well. One thing I'll mention is that we do have an ongoing study with a geochemist, mercury expert, who is looking at the source of mercury in our dolphins, as well as dolphins from Harbor Branch and sharks and some fish. And so he can actually pinpoint the source of the mercury, and that's ongoing. So we think we'll get a little bit better idea about where the dolphins are picking up the mercury, and what the damage might actually be for them. One important, really, really important thing to point out is that although these dolphins have very, very high levels of mercury in their system, it may not affect them drastically. And this is true for dolphins all over the place, and other places where the levels are high, because dolphins have they also accumulate selenium in their tissues, and their molar ratio of mercury to selenium is eerily 1-to-1. I mean, you can't make data more perfect than that top slide, or that top graph. So there's been a lot of speculation about this, but it's widely believed that selenium buffers the harmful effects of accumulated mercury in their system, because a dolphin with that level of mercury should be toxic to them. They should not survive that level. So the selenium seems to buffer the effects of that, which is awesome news for them, of course. So this is work by my other co-author, Dr. Sam Rossman, who works with, he's a quantitative ecologist, and he does a lot of work with stable isotopes. Carbon and nitrogen isotopes are super useful for lots of reasons. The main use for them in dolphins has been to look at the trophic level that the dolphins feed at, and also to look at the habitat. So whether or not they're associated with seagrass or they're more marine than estuary, you can get a good handle on that using carbon and nitrogen isotopes. Because these dolphins were emaciated, and the speculation was that, these dolphins are starving, and that might be because of prey abundance issues or prey availability issues. We wanted to look at the unusual mortality event versus the non-UME foraging trends. So Sam took muscle from dolphins during the UME, and we took samples that we had in storage before the UME and after the UME. And you can see those years at the bottom of the graph. And what he found was that dolphin foraging habits were similar during the large die-off in 2013 and all other years. So basically the dolphins were eating the same thing that they were accustomed to eating before and after the UME. So we don't feel like prey availability or prey abundance was an issue for them. They were eating the same things that they normally eat. So we don't think that that was the major cause of the die-off, at least for dolphins. This is the good news. Nitrogen can also give you insight in changes in wastewater over time. So Sam looked at nitrogen levels taken up in the dolphins from 1995 on, and looked at how those changes parsed out over time. And what you can see is that there's a general trend downward. And what this means, because the dolphins were feeding on the same trophic level and the same fish during that time, we suspect that this lower nitrogen level over time is an indication that wastewater remediation in the lagoon is being shown to be effective. So this means that dolphins are exposed to lower nitrogen over time, accumulating it in smaller amounts over time. And we suspect that this shows that things are moving in the right direction as far as nitrogen. I will say that these levels are still higher than in dolphins from Sarasota Bay. And that bay is a tidally flushed system. So they probably don't have the issues that we have here. So it's not entirely good news, but it means we're moving in the right direction. So I think that's exciting, and it's really cool for us to be able to look at dolphin tissues that we've stored in our freezer for all this time, and show that they're a really unique and wonderful tool to look at ecosystem health. I did want to end up by saying that, yes, we are scientists and we're not educators, but it's hard to sit on the sidelines and not try to do something about the issues that we're having with our dolphins. So we do a lot of education and outreach We have a wonderful volunteer who runs some homeschool projects out of our lab, and we also go into schools. We teach K through college age kids about dolphins, how to report injured and stranded animals, and then how to reduce inputs into the lagoon, being, things like nitrogen, and also monofilament recycling and monofilament cleanup and that sort of thing. So we also put out these placards you might have seen around Brevard County that say not to feed wild dolphins. We're pretty lucky here. We don't have a real big problem with dolphin feeding, but like they do in the Panhandle, but it is an issue here, and it is a potential issue to be made worse. So we're trying to nip it in the bud before it gets too bad. But so we did put out these placards that you might have seen around. There's my required pretty slide at the end. I did want to thank the NEP for the funding, and also a lot of the funding for this also came from our Florida Oceans Plate that you see there. So with that, do you want to take dolphin questions now, and then we'll do the otter talk?
Yeah, Megan,
Okay.
please. So we have some people with their hands up. So Jay Moynihan, you have a question for Megan Stolen?
I do. Well, kind of a question and then maybe comment. Megan, are male dolphins larger than female dolphins?
Yes, they are. Yep.
Then my comment might be that simply due to their larger size, they may encounter more stress, and therefore that might account for the difference in the mortality rate. Just a thought.
Yeah, I think they would have trouble dumping heat, although pregnant females also are not in the best shape to dump heat either. They can only dump so much. I think part of the issue with male dolphins probably is some of that's territorial kind of stuff. We have a lot of, well, I won't say a lot, but about a quarter of our animals have broken jaws, and most of those are males. So we know that they fight, and those broken jaws can cause them issues. So it makes sense, males are generally more aggressive toward each other. They also travel a lot more, so they may be more susceptible to shark attacks if they're going out on the ocean, that sort of thing.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Charlie Venuto, a question for Megan Stolen.
Yeah, hi, Megan. Thanks for the informative presentation and the work that you and your team is doing. I have a couple questions. When you referring to the selenium levels, do we know the source of the selenium, or is that being studied as well?
Oh, I do not know the source of selenium. I do not know. That's a good question. I mean, it builds up in the food chain for certain, but I don't know where the original source of that. I don't know the biochemistry of that. I can find out.
Okay. It was interesting because it looks like Mercury is behaving as a typical bioaccumulator as through the age that increases in the body weight. I was kind of curious. You looked at a couple different organs when you studied them. Did it also include, and you may have mentioned it, in their blubber? Because it seems like that would be a natural place where you would accumulate organic toxins.
Yeah, so blubber is a good indication of lipophilic chemicals, so things like PCBs and DDT and things like that. But the best place to really study, well, you can do muscle for mercury too, but the sort of the long-term catch for mercury is in their liver, because that's your organ for detoxifying. So that's essentially where it's stored over time.
Okay, and then I think my last question is on funding. You mentioned you get some funding from Save Our Oceans license plate. Do you also derive any from the Dolphin license plate? And if not, where is that money going?
The short answer to that is no, with the exception of this year, they did open it up again. It used to be when the Dolphin license plate first started, there was an RFP, competitive RFP, and we all applied for it, and we did get funding for a number of years. And then Harbor Branch pulled back and decided they wanted to, keep it in-house, and they fund their own dolphin studies with it. But last year they did open it up, and we did get, I think it was $10,000 to do some collaborative work with them. So yeah.
Thank
Okay,
you.
all through, Charlie?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
You're welcome.
Laura Lee Thompson for Megan Stolen.
Hi, Megan. You did a really, really good job. I have several questions here. On the average mortality of 42 dolphins a year, what is the birth rate? Is the population stable or is it declining?
It is actually stable. So in the early 80s, Steve Leatherwood worked for Hubbs-SeaWorld as well back then, and they did a bunch of aerial surveys in the 80s, and their population estimate at that time was somewhere between 750 to 1,000 animals. They didn't have the same robust statistical design, then that we do now. And then over the years, actually starting right after 9/11, we started flying surveys, and the results from those aerial surveys were again about 750 to 1,000 animals. And then when Wendy completed her study in 2017 on using boat-based robust design Mercury capture, which is really the gold standard for abundance estimates in dolphins, the estimate was right about 1,000 dolphins too. So they seem to have weathered all of these storms quite well as far as survivability goes. I do think that the population itself is stable, but I will say the results from the body condition work that Wendy did and the mortality events that we've had do show that this population, I'll say, is sort of living on the edge. And we are, ripe for a viral outbreak or something like that. If something comes through, if the dolphins are immunocompromised and already in a, depleted condition, it's a little scary for us.
Yeah,
but
that leads me to my second question, which is, prior to the algae blooms and the large fish kills that we've been experiencing in recent years, but going back to the 80s and 90s, were the dolphins underweight then, or is this this situation with most of the dolphins being underweight, is that more recent?
That's a great question. We didn't have really good data prior to 2008 was the second big die-off. We had a lot of skinny dolphins in 2001 during that event, but we didn't have good data before and after that. So I'd say for the last 12 years, we know they've been thin. And the other thing that I didn't mention is Wendy also looked at skin lesions on the dolphins, and skin lesions can happen for a lot of different reasons. There's one, there's a herpes virus called dolphin pox that shows, it's kind of like a cold sore. When you get stressed out, you get these sores in your mouth. And dolphin pox is a herpes virus as well. It's very similar. So I think her number was in the 90s. The number of dolphins that exhibited some evidence of dolphin pox, but she also had some other skin lesions that were concerning. So the fact that they're skinny and the fact that they've got these skin conditions, which sort of indicate stress, is kind of bad news. And those skin conditions have been around for a while. Harbor Branch has documented those as well.
On the temperature, summer's obviously a bad time for dolphins, but what do you think is going to happen as climate change occurs and the temperature keeps going up and Florida kind of loses its winter season?
Yeah, I think dolphins in inland waters are gonna feel it for
So
sure.
will they move north, or what? I mean, the temperature's going up north too. They'd have to go to the Arctic to cool off.
Yeah.
Wow.
Bottlenose dolphins are pretty adaptable. They live in virtually all oceans of the world, various different habitats. So they're pretty adaptable. I guess it would depend on how fast the change happens. One thing I do like to point out to people is, dolphins, they do move, but they're like any other mammal. There's only so much they can do, right? They can only move so far. They have to find available prey. They have to find available habitat. They have to avoid threats. So they can only move so much.
Thank you.
Okay, one last question from Todd Swingle.
Yeah, it's just an observation, quick question. On one of your later slides talks about some improvements and links with the decline in nitrogen levels, and cites the apparent source of that is changes in wastewater. Is that have you truly attributed that to wastewater, or because candidly there's many nitrogen contribution sources, much of which we're dealing with on this committee, that are fertilizers and septic, which can be construed as wastewater, but not as typically in in that terminology. So trying to clarify if you've actually, is that an accurate correlation, or is that just was that word just used relative to the nitrogen reductions that have been seen?
I'm not sure. Maybe Megan froze up. Megan, are you still there? I think we lost Megan for right now. Anybody have any suggestions? Maybe we need to move on to Gary.
So we could move on. I would just ask that Virginia follow up, because I do think that anyone that we're partnering with and that is portraying themselves as, that's portraying science and expert, that some of this language and terminology is absolutely critical. And when we give information that gives, that may.
She's back, Todd. She's back.
Oh, yep. You're on mute.
You may need to repeat the question because I'm not sure when you lost her.
I think I got most of it. So you're asking about the nitrogen and the signature of that, and the term of using the term wastewater. So Sam Rossman, who did this work, did similar work in Sarasota Bay, and developed the signature for, I think the term would really be runoff. So nitrogen from runoff. He did specifically call out in the report that this nitrogen isotope level is not the same as a septic signature. So it would be a different signature. So to really parse out the full extent of the nitrogen isotope signature, we'd have to do more work for sure.
Yeah, and so I guess my request is that, you know, as a scientist and in giving those presentations, that unless that data is specifically attributable to wastewater, and the term wastewater is in the groups that are associated with these conversations, almost always associated with municipal wastewater. So unless it is specific, unless you've got specific data to isolate that, I would ask that you broaden that term to represent kind of the spectrum of contributing nitrogen sources, because it's one thing that this group is dealing with, is to make sure that we are focused on the primary sources of the issues, of which we certainly wastewater is one of them, septic is one, runoff. There's many different sources, and we're trying to make sure that we've got the appropriate conversations that occur in the public as well, because there is significant public sentiment that can get targeted on one source or the other, and anything that we do as scientists and in representation of our data that may that impacts that in a negative way of us being able to focus on all the contributors is problematic.
Right. So I can follow up with you and cross-check with him, and I'll get the actual language for you, and tell you where the sensitivity is. So I can get back with all of you on that.
Okay,
And
thanks,
send you
Megan.
the original paper from Sarasota. Yep.
Vinny, did you have a question for Megan on dolphins?
I did. It was just a quick one, Megan, and it had to do with your comment at the end where you said, you know, you guys do a little bit of education, and I'm just a small step on my soapbox. I think our education and outreach go hand in hand, and I think a lot of times these research and reports that people do, no one knows about it, and then all of a sudden we have a huge fish kill, and people are like, well, why didn't you say anything? And people are like, we've been saying it all along. So I just have to say that education and outreach really go hand in hand, and I hope that there is more attention. And Megan, this isn't against you. I know you're so busy and dollars count, but I just really hope that we can find a way to combine education and outreach more. Sorry, John, for I'll get off my soapbox.
Okay, thanks, Vinny. I know Megan listened to your comments, and she's just eager to get on with her next topic, which is the furriest little creatures in the Fast and the Furious. That's it.
Okay. You can see that. Yes.
Yes.
Oh no. Oh no. Okay, it froze up again. Sorry about that. All right, so so this piggybacks on the dolphin work that we did. We've been using dolphins as sentinels of estuary health for some time. And in 2016, we took a leap of faith and decided that we were also going to look at otters in the lagoon as sentinels for estuary health. They are in many ways similar to dolphins in that they're, you know, primarily fish eaters. They live in the lagoon, but they're different in other ways because they also live right on the interface between the land and the water. And so they're open to different threats, different risks. And so we thought they would make a good species focus to look at. Also, since nobody had ever worked on them in the lagoon, and we really wanted to understand what the status was of this certain carnivore. So we started looking at them in 2016, and I'm going to give you some of the results from some of the work that we've done since then. So This little guy right here was the poster child for this project. He came up on our lagoon in 2016 and said hello, and was sort of the reason that we got started. We don't have seals here in Florida, but these guys kind of fit along that same niche, which is that they're dependent both on the estuary and also the land, and highly dependent on fresh water as well. So they really fit in that sweet spot, crossing all habitats around the lagoon. Our study area for otters is expanded relative to the dolphin study that we've done. So we actually cover 7 counties on the east coast of Florida. And we go not just along the lagoon itself, but we also are trying to understand these animals in the St. Johns River as well. So right now, HSWRI is the only organization currently studying river otters in Florida at the population level. We rely highly on our citizen science project called Otter Spotter, which we started in 2016. So we go into the community, we give talks, we table at events, and we try to recruit people to feed us information on otter sightings. So we spend a lot of time talking to people. This is a huge component of what we do. And it's been really, really successful. We get sightings of both live animals and vehicle strike otters. It's the same system. Folks go into our website or on Facebook, they hit the contact button, and they can report a live sighting as well as a dead animal that they may have found. And usually those are vehicle strikes. So I'll touch a little bit on the live otter data that we have. There's a map of the live otter sightings from 2016 to date. Many of those sightings are overlapping. So this represents hundreds of sightings of otters. We have otters in both urban and non-developed areas. So places like the Merritt Island National Wildlife Refuge is home to otters, but we often get otters in people's backyards. So you see the 3 here that came up to this person's swimming pool, took a little dip and drank some water out of their pool, and that's not uncommon. We have a lot of otters living in HOA communities and backyard ponds, retention ponds. Vieira Wetlands has some, so they're kind of all over. What's interesting is that we have no reports from the oceanic environment. So we have otters along A1A, but we don't have otters that actually enter the saltwater environment, which is different than in California, where they regularly go into saltwater environments, probably be due to their foraging strategy, which is different than it is here. I'm going to turn now to the vehicle strikes, because this is really the mainstay of our data. So animals are struck on roads all the time in fairly high numbers. We were actually quite surprised by the number of animals that we get every year. The animals are reported using our hotline web form. We pick up the animal, put it on ice, and then examine the animal back at our lab. And this mirrors the work that we do with dolphins. So they're getting a full workup. If the animal is in really, really bad condition, decomposed, it gets some minimal data application. So we still measure them, collect samples from them, but most of the animals are actually quite in quite good condition, meaning that they're not decomposed. And so we can do a full necropsy on them. And we collect a lot of information. So here's some of the sample collection items that we take. We take every piece of their body is taken, soft tissue. We fix it or we freeze it, and we're using it appropriately for different studies. We look at their reproductive tissues. We sample their gastrointestinal contents. So we're looking at what they're feeding on, their parasite load, and then we, of course, measure them, weigh them, and do all the typical mammalogy stuff. We also collect almost all of their skeletons. We have the largest collection of otter skeletons now in the Southeast. And so we collect their skeletons to look at the effects of trauma, but also chronic skeletal issues over time. I did want to pivot really, really quickly and just tell you that we do have, occasionally we do have mortality that is not associated with vehicle strikes. So we had this otter on the left-hand side that was actually, we believe was an alligator attack. Alligators are the #1 predators of otters in the water. Outside the water, it's a different story, but in the water, it's alligators. We also had this crab trap problem. So otters can go in through that bait door that's shown there with the blue arrow. They go into the crab trap and can't get out, and they drown. So this is the one and only documented case we had with photographs, but we know this is happening more than is being reported. So we have anecdotal evidence that this is happening, and we're not hearing about it. One thing that we're kind of excited about is we were actually approached by a fishery biologist who was approached by a crabber in Texas who was having an issue with otters in his traps as well. And he was very concerned about it and wanted to do something about it. So we contacted someone in South Carolina who is working on these doors. That red device that you see there is a Diamondback Terrapin excluder device. So in South Carolina, they have issues with terrapins becoming entrapped in crab traps as well. And so they've devised this this excluder door that will sit on the outside of the trap at that door, and it will allow crabs to enter, but it is small enough to deter Diamondback terrapins. And he wanted to know if this would work for otters too. So he contacted us, and we did some measurements on the skulls, but also on fully fleshed heads of otters that we had collected, and found that indeed these traps will exclude otters as well. So I'm kind of excited about that. I think they've deployed them now in Texas experimentally to see if it will help with their otter situation, but I'd love to see somebody use those here as well, and maybe it would help with some of the mortality. I don't think it's a huge source of mortality, but I do think it's there, and we don't always know about it. So getting back to the roadkill, this is the location of the dead otters that we had from 2016 to the end of 2019. Usually they're single strikes, but the one on the left here, you can see these 3 were all struck at the same time. This is actually a bachelor group. These are all males that were struck on North Merritt Island on US 3, all in the same day. Occasionally we get pairs, so we'll get a mother and a pup together. This shows you the vehicle strikes by year and month. So in 2016 was the first year we've done, started working on this. So the numbers were quite low, and I think that's more because of effort than it was because the otters weren't being hit. But in 2017, 2018, and 2019, you can see the distribution of seasonal distribution, and you can see that there is a uptick in the winter months. This is when otters are starting to move around during mating season to find mates. So we find significantly more strikes in the winter and less in the summertime. This is motor vehicle strikes by otters by age. So you can see males and females on there. This represents 52 otters over the time period. We take the canine teeth from the otters and we section it and age the animals. And that's what that picture shows on the bottom right-hand side. So the mean age for this strike sample is 2.5 years. The really significant thing to point out is that 51% of all of these otters were less than 2 years of age when they were struck. So it's the naive young animals who are being hit on the roads primarily. And that's problematic, obviously, because these are animals that are just coming into reproductive age and they're being struck by cars. There's a slight difference in the male to female ratio with 29 to 23 here. And that is probably a real indicator that the males are moving around more than females. And so when they're moving around to find mates, they actually cross roads more often and are struck more often. So with vehicle strikes, we get multi-organ rupture, we get fractured bones, ribs and skulls, we get proptosis of the eyes, and obviously soft tissue hemorrhage. So all the things you would expect. Most of the animals are not going to live through this. They're killed instantly. So it's not surprising and that animals are struck, and we know cause of death in the animals when we get them. So it's different than our dolphin work where we're really trying to understand cause of death. But with these animals, it gives us a chance to understand the sublethal effects in animals. So we're looking at the infectious disease that they carry with them until they're struck by the car. So it's a snapshot. It's a different surveillance tool than capturing otters and bleeding them and taking samples from them. It's really just an opportunistic way. But a good way to sample animals for disease. So we did, it's very expensive to do this. We had funding for 14 samples. So we looked at histopathology results from those animals, and we find things like hepatitis, pneumonia, lymphadenitis, problems with their heart. And so these animals would, in many cases, especially with a liver that looks like this one on the left, this would eventually kill that animal had it not been struck by the car. This would, progress and it would become fatal. So we don't usually find otters that die of natural causes because they're cryptic. When they're sick or they're dying, they die in the middle of nowhere in the woods, or, they're gonna curl up and never be seen again. So we don't really have a good way of understanding natural mortality, but this gives us a window into that. Related to water quality specifically, we were very interested in understanding if these otters were subjected to toxoplasmosis, which is a protozoal disease. It's also zoonotic. It's transmitted by cats, both domestic or feral cats, but also wild cats like bobcats. And so we wanted to see if our otters had an issue with toxoplasmosis, and we're concerned about that because toxoplasmosis is a huge mortality factor with California sea lions, sea otters as well as river otters in California. So it does cause death of those animals out there, and it's a significant mortality for endangered species out there. So we wanted to see if it was a problem in the lagoon, because toxo can actually live in places like the lagoon for, you know, up to a year. It can move through wastewater. It can run off. It can be caused by a direct runoff from the land itself. And the good news is we only found it in one of the animals that we looked at. Our sample size was pretty low, but I think it's still good news that we only found it in one animal. What we did find in higher numbers is a protozoal disease called sarcocystosis, and it's caused by a protozoan that's similar to Toxoplasma, but the intermediate host, well, it's actually derived, we think, we still have to speciate it, but we think it's coming from possums. So they are exposed, the otters are exposed through the water, but it's not coming from cats, it's coming from possums. We also looked at mercury along with the dolphins. I have better news on that front. So we looked at 22 sets of liver and kidney, and you can see the mean liver and kidney values there. These values are consistent with otters from other states. So these are not alarming at all. These are not very high. We do know that it can be hyper localized, so we probably or should do more work on this, especially in areas where we think the mercury levels might be higher, but we don't think it's a big problem for them. Otters don't live as long as dolphins, so they don't have as much time to accumulate the mercury, so it's probably not an issue for them. This was probably the coolest thing that came out of this study so far. So we looked at stable isotope signatures in these otters as well. And now we're getting back to where they're foraging and where they're living. And the sample size was low, but it looks like we have pretty good data to suggest that there are two ecotypes of river otters in the study area. So we have a marine type and we have a freshwater type. And that graph there on the right-hand side shows the signatures of carbon to nitrogen, and it really couldn't get any cleaner than that. It really shows that they're two different types. The marine type, we only had a few specimens of those. And two of those were found very close to the inlet. So it makes sense. One of them was actually found in Century. So I'm a little confused about what a, quote, marine river otter was doing in Century, but obviously the animal had been foraging for a while in a marine environment and then moved inland. So I just have a few summary slides that sort of put this into context. Vehicle strikes on North American river otters are seasonal with more hit in late fall, and this is consistent with movement patterns across the world, showing when people have looked at roadkill statistics, it's not unusual. Unfortunately, we don't have a population estimate for otters in our area or for Florida in general, and they are still hunted or trapped in Florida. We don't know the effect of the vehicle strikes on the population, but we know from other places like in Israel that approximately 5% of the Eurasian otter population is killed every year from vehicle strikes. And I like to point out that worldwide, roads are the second largest source of anthropogenic mortality for vertebrates after legal harvest. In the United States, it's estimated that approximately 1 million vertebrates are killed every year on US roads. There's a male bias in the vehicle strikes in our area, and this is consistent with other studies of otters and other mustelids in general, and is generally explained by their reproductive behavior. Young otters are disproportionately killed by vehicles, and this can have a critical effect on the long-term viability of the species, especially in places where river otters have been reintroduced after a severe decline in the 1800s. The patterns of skeletal trauma include severe injury to the head and cranial body, and otters hit by vehicles are generally killed quickly with little chance of rehab. Toxicology and health data can be derived from roadkill carcasses, and road ecology is a relatively new field of study, and it represents an underutilized and inexpensive source of sentinel species data. So I really encourage other scientists to look at the roads for answers about species that might be difficult to study otherwise. And then finally, there are early data suggesting that there may be 2 ecotypes of river otters in the lagoon watershed, specializing in marine and freshwater foraging. And with that, again, I want to thank the folks that helped fund this project. Rockwell Collins gave us some early money, and then we got more money from the NEP.
Thank you, Megan. That was great. Charlie Venuto, you have a question?
You have a couple, if it's okay.
Please.
So, yeah, hi, Megan. Again, thanks. Good presentation. I recall seeing that trio of otters on the side of the road driving up to the Space Center one day, and that was pretty sad sight. I was wondering on the population, when you were talking about the road kills, and it was higher in the younger ones. But is that partially a function that there are more younger individuals, since there'd be a natural die out over time? Was that kind of factored in, weighed into the statistics?
Yeah, I mean, yes, that probably makes sense as well. We really just don't have a good handle on the demography of river otters here at all. When I called FWC originally to get information on them, that was in 2015. They said that nobody was really looking at them at all. So we don't know what how it plays out, but it does make sense that it would be that we might have more in the younger population. I'd have to look at other states and see if they have a better handle on that than we do.
You had mentioned hunting, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I believe you can trap or shoot otters.
Yes.
And again, do we know enough about their population? Because I think there's no bag limit on them. I mean,
right. So it's a little tricky. They're a fur bearer, so they're regulated under the fur bearer hunting regulations by FWC. Again, in 2015, when I called to speak with somebody about that, I wanted to know how many were being hunted, because I did find an article from the 80s that I think it showed that there were more than 1,000 taken in Florida. I'd have to go back and look at that article again, but I wondered if it was still that high, and what the population level was and how they came, could determine how many could be taken and that sort of thing. At that time, they told me that they didn't know how many were in Florida, but they felt like the population was high enough because the animals were hit on the roads on a regular basis, that they felt like the population level was high enough to sustain the hunting. The only way that I know of that they track it is looking at the number of CITES tags that they give out. So CITES is an international treaty that we all have to abide by, and CITES regulates the trade in otter fur. So when people are trapping otters, they're trapping them primarily for their fur to sell, primarily overseas. It's generally not sold here in the United States. And the year that I called was in 2015. I think they had given out 4 CITES tags. So I don't think it's widely done anymore. I think it's just a few people that are still trapping. But you can hunt or I don't want to say hunt. You can dispatch animals if they become a nuisance to your property. So we know that animals are killed as nuisance animals.
I think we need an otter license plate.
Yeah, that's been brought up.
I'm all for it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Harry Castro, any questions?
Good morning. Thank you, Megan. A couple questions. One on the ecotypes, marine versus fresh water. It sounds like that's determined primarily by their eating habits, and if they change their locale and adopt a different diet, then their ecotype changes.
It does. So we use mussel, and the mussel turnover rate for those isotopes is months to a year. So those signatures were probably good for indicative of their foraging of those particular animals for several months or up to a year, but they certainly can change. And we would need to look at the signature and their bones probably to get a better long-term picture of it.
Yeah.
So mussel's good for a while, but
Okay, so they can change depending on what they eat.
Yeah.
The second question had to do with the mortality rate. You mentioned gators #1 in the water, and roadkill and harvesting sound like the top contenders for out of the water. What are the natural sort of land-based predators that otters encounter?
So it would be any type of large carnivore. It could be a bobcat, a coyote. In the literature, it also mentions domestic dogs. So every year there's a report of a domestic dog getting into a fight with an otter. I think they're usually going after the pups. They just, like dogs do, chasing squirrels or whatever. If they happen to see some pups, they might go after them. But it's not, it's probably bobcats and coyotes primarily.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, if I don't see any other questions for Megan, thank you very much for 2 awesome presentations, and
Thank you.
appreciate you coming by.
Thank you. I'll get back to those 2 questions that I had, and I'll send them to send the answers to Virginia, and then she can follow up with you all.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, now we're going to move on to Gary Zarillo talking about environmental modeling of muck dredging benefits.
Okay, can we do a sound check and a screen check?
I can hear you.
Okay.
I see your screen, and it's you've got the preview slide showing on the left side, so it's not the full presentation mode.
Let's see if I can get the full presentation mode. Let's see. How does that look?
We see your slide and the next slide coming up at the same time.
Dr. Zarillo, click display settings up on top.
And stop. Okay, how does that look?
Okay, we've got you full screen. I think it looks good.
All right. So I'm going to burn through this. Thanks for the opportunity to review this. Environmental modeling of muck dredging benefits. If I fade in sound, let me know. I'll try to keep a constant decibel level. We've been working on this for a few years under the auspices of a DEP grant for Brevard County muck dredging assessment. Our project goals, of course, integrated hydrological and watershed model assessment, simulate influence of muck on IRL water quality, and forecasting what are the benefits, potential benefits of muck dredging, muck removal. There are three modeling platforms: the three-dimensional environmental fluid dynamics coder, EFDC. Florida Tech, i.e. myself and a couple others, introduced this modeling scheme originating at BIMS in the early 1990s or late 1980s to the Florida environment through an original project with the St. John's. This is tightly coupled with what is essentially the Chesapeake Bay water quality model. This is HEM 3D, eutrophication model. And luckily for us, we have Applied Ecology's watershed model developed over the last few years, the spatial watershed iterative loading model developed by Claudio Listapat. Model components, just to give you an overview of how the various components interact. We have hydrodynamics coupled to the water quality model, inputs from the hydro model and also the swill model. And you can see the major nutrient and constituent forms spread out here along the lower row, including the greens, the diatoms, and others. Algae forms. Right now, the hydrodynamic model extends from Ponce Inlet all the way down to Fort Pierce. It has about 11,000 water cells. And you can see at Ponce, Sebastian, and Fort Pierce, it extends into the coastal ocean. I just want to mention here an important aspect of how we drive this model from the coastal ocean. It's coupled with two different basin scale models. One is called HICOM, which is the hybrid coastal ocean model, and the other is ADCIRC, which provides all the tidal constituents. And those two combined give us a pretty good record of what's going on in the coastal ocean that can be transmitted into the estuary. And this is a little bit novel for estuarine models, and this was mentioned in the ocean observations meeting last year. As an important aspect of extending ocean basin models into the estuary, this coupling between essentially global scale models and local models. The list of water quality model state variables up to 22 right now. The water quality model is calculating all of these except for macroalgae, and I'm not saying that it's all done accurately. The water quality model, along with the hydrodynamic model, is only as good as the data that drives it, but I think we're doing a pretty good job on the major constituents. Mentioning the swill model, all of the IRL subbasins included in the swill model, and this has been recently expanded and refined up in the Patrick Air Force Base vicinity. On the right-hand side, just an example of total nitrogen, total phosphorus predicted on a daily basis in terms of kilograms per day, and of course that's downscaled into finer units for inclusion in the water quality model. This is quite a good thing and really helps I think the accuracy in resolution of the water quality model. Just 2 or 3 slides on model validation. First, here comparing water level, observed water level at the Wabasso Bridge in North Indian River County with the model water level. And this is over a year's worth of predictions here and observations. I just want to quickly point out these 2 high stands of sea level that occur each year in kind of the late October timeframe. This is the Gulf Stream at work. We have about a 2 foot plus, that's a 2 foot plus sweep of sea level up and down every year because of the dynamics of the Gulf Stream. There's a lot of literature out there, a lot of studies on the effects of the Gulf Stream on sea level. It's been hypothesized that the sea level rise hotspot in the Mid-Atlantic states is due to slowing of the Gulf Stream and its other components. And so this is a major influence on our estuaries all along the east coast of Florida. Comparison of model and observed salinities. So the observed data is from one of the Harbor Branch Lobo stations in the vicinity of Sebastian Inlet. The statistics are in the report. It's doing quite a good job on salinity. Similarly, similar comparison between Lobo captured water temperature and model produced water temperature, doing a good job on reproducing the water temperatures. And in part, this is due to the ocean signal of salinity and water temperature coming in at the inlet boundaries provided by the Basin scale model, as well as the simulation of data within the estuary from observations. I'm not going to claim that the model is calibrated for water quality constituents, but it's doing a good job. We do have a lot of water quality measurements, but not of the same sort of continuous time series that we have for the physical aspect of the estuary. Nevertheless, the model does seem to provide good predictions, a good model data comparison as exemplified here in the Turkey Creek Basin in the 2014-15 time period, comparing ammonia and nitrogen, that's ammonium, in the water column with 5 different vertical layers of the model. And so the model is certainly capturing the sweep of the values of the measured data at 0.5 of a meter and about a meter below the water surface. So the Muck dredging zones prioritized or included in this phase of the study. We have 7 of them from Turkey Creek to Mims, the approximate surface area, the approximate volumes of muck either dredged or to be dredged. And then over here on the right-hand side, we have the ammonium flux in tons per square kilometer per year. These values are either estimated because we just don't have the measurements, or they're provided in a range based on measurements by John Treffery and Austin Fox. These aren't time series, but they're values that can be used to set up what I call the sediment flux zones in the model. So the more data, the better. We certainly need more of these kinds of measurements. I don't have time to go into how the model works in terms of sediment flux, but there is a sediment diagenesis submodel that includes measurements and or estimates of flux of various nutrients such as ammonium, phosphate, chemical oxygen demand, sediment oxygen demand, and a few others that can be set up in a series of zones at the bottom of the model. So this is how we include the influence of muck dredging, is by adjusting those flux values in the sediment zones. For this particular study, I reduced the reduction of sediment flux values, particularly ammonium, by 90%. I think in the next phase, I've been asked to reduce the ammonium flux from the sediments into the water column by 60%. Again, we sort of need more measurements in these muck zones to see how they're doing pre and post dredge. Let's start with the Turkey Creek muck zone, and you can see it over here on the left. TCM1 and TCM2 are the 2 monitoring, numerical monitoring stations, if you will. And the first graph here simply shows the major forms of nitrogen predicted over a time series of this particular model run. The model run is a year long. There's about a 2 or 3 month spin-up time, so we're showing about maybe 10 months of simulation. And there's a lot of stuff going on here. We have total nitrogen. We also have the outflow from Turkey Creek for comparison. We have dissolved organic nitrogen, ammonium, and nitrite, which is a minor constituent at this particular location. It turns out in the model that if you're looking at inflow influenced areas versus areas that don't have as much freshwater inflow, there is a difference in the form of nitrogen that shows up in the model. And so you can see the sort of high stand of freshwater inflow correlates with a fairly dramatic increase in total nitrogen along with the other constituents that make up the TN or total nitrogen value. So kind of take a picture of that in your minds. We're looking at predictions at T, C, and 1. Another interesting aspect is to compare total nitrogen at this particular station over time with the predicted dissolved oxygen values. This is the surface layer of the model. The model has 5 vertical layers, each 20% of the water column. And you can see in that high flow season with increased nitrogen, total nitrogen in the bottom layer, that the predicted DO values drop to near 0 and close to 0 in the surface layer. So here is the post-dredge total nitrogen prediction compared with the pre-dredge total nitrogen prediction compared with the inflow from the gauged USGS station in Turkey Creek. And I should also say that the inflows are also tagged with concentrations of nutrients provided by John Treffery and Austin Fox. And it's hard to see the difference. One of the things that we notice is that in these high inflow areas that the effects of influence of dredging are a bit masked by the inflow signature, the signature of the inflows on local water quality. But you can see still there's the predicted reduction in total nitrogen in the bottom layer in the post-dredge condition. So we'll pick this apart a little bit more, look at the predicted pre-dredge and post-dredge ammonium concentration for a portion of the model time series. And you can definitely see a fractional reduction in the predicted ammonium concentration under the post-dredge condition. So these are the kinds of things that we expected to see from the model output. So this is still inside the Turkey Creek Basin. But what about regional effects? And this was kind of surprising to me, looking at predictions of total nitrogen in the bottom layer, pre-dredge and post-dredge, up here at one of the locations of the St. John's monitoring, water quality monitoring system. I would say it's about 3 or 4 kilometers to the north of the Turkey Creek Basin. And as the model simulation proceeds, about halfway through it or so, you can see that there is a measurable reduction in total nitrogen predicted by the model way up here. So that was a little surprising to me, but that's a good thing. Even more surprising way down here at IRL Station 27, St. John's Station, you can still see the signature of the reduction in total nitrogen in the post-dredge condition. So that's, I really didn't expect that, but there it is. And it's maybe half of that model run. Once you get into the higher flows of the summer season beginning sort of actually in this time period, you can see that the difference is a little bit less. So what about dissolved oxygen here down at IRL Station 27? Even at this distance, you can see a slight increase in the predicted concentration of DO, dissolved oxygen, during the model run. So again, at least in terms of the model, the effects of muck dredging present, of course, in the Turkey Creek Basin, but also detectable, measurable at these more distal stations. So that to me, that's a very interesting result. So let's move to the Ogalley region, muck zone northeast. There are 3 muck zones here targeted for dredging. And in this first set of runs, I'm looking at the potential impacts, influence of dredging in Ogalley northeast. I have 2 monitoring stations in the area, numerical monitoring stations, EGM2 and EGM1. Here is a output of model nutrient constituents in the pre-dredge condition. And here The roles of dissolved organic nitrogen and nitrite are a little bit reversed. Here we do see a large component of the total nitrogen predicted to be nitrite, along with our dissolved organic nitrogen. Also in this model output, I show for comparison the gauged freshwater outflows or the water outflows from the Ogalley River. And you can see some influence of the wet season here. Some high stands or higher values of total nitrogen, kind of similar to the Turkey Creek Basin situation. So that's the pre-dredge breakdown of nitrogen forms. And now we have predicted pre and post-dredge total nitrogen at our station down here, maybe 1.5 kilometers or so from the dredge site. And you can see, again, compared with the flows, and you can see a measurable reduction in the predicted surface nitrogen concentration in the post-dredge model run. And again, it gets a bit masked or limited under the high flow inflow season, the wet season, again, masks the effects of the dredging a little bit, but nevertheless, they are still there. So that's an interesting result. Galley Muck Zone dissolved oxygen predictions at EGM2, a couple kilometers to the southwest, and there is a measurable increase in the predicted concentrations of dissolved oxygen in the post-dredge surface model layer. So now we move to Grand Canal Muck Zone, shown here over on the right-hand side. I can't produce grid cells small enough to zigzag in and out of the canal systems. However, I set up an overall footprint of the model over the Grand Canal region, and then using a few measurements that are available, the few measurements that are available of sediment flux, prorated that sediment flux over the entire footprint of the dredge project. And that's explained in the report. So here is the pre-dredge condition, concentration of nitrogen forms, total nitrogen, and then the other major form of nitrite, and the role of dissolved organic nitrogen drops. And then we can see that ammonium nitrogen is also down here at low concentrations, as it should be. So that's a pre-dredge condition breakdown of nitrogen forms. Now we go to predictions of total nitrogen from all of these components in the pre and post-dredge condition. And you can definitely see more than a measurable reduction in total nitrogen predicted after dredging of all of the footprint of the Grand Canal project. So that is, that's a good thing. And here we have, and I'm only showing, I have other monitoring stations in the area, but I'm only showing it from GCM1. Here is the pre and post-dredge prediction for dissolved oxygen at this numerical monitoring station. You can see that the post-dredge DO values are predicted to be fairly steady at a fairly high value, and the pre-dredge condition in this area is predicted to be fairly low over the course of the model run. Now moving on to Cocoa Beach Muck Zones phase 1, 2, and 3. I had 3 monitoring stations outside the footprint of the dredging area. And I'm only going to show results for Cocoa Beach Monitoring Station 1, but all of them were similar in terms of post-dredge prediction. Here, as usual, for the non-large inflow influenced zones, that total nitrogen is dominated by nitrite, lesser components of concentrations of ammonium, of course, and the dissolved organic nitrogen is not really a significant component, at least in the prediction of the model. So we have predicted pre-dredge nitrogen concentrations bottom layer at Cocoa Beach M1. So here the post-dredge condition, total nitrogen bottom, and total nitrogen bottom layer in the pre-dredge. And you can see that after hypothetical dredging of this area in phase 1 and at this station, there is a pretty dramatic drop in the predicted concentration of total nitrogen. So here again, pre-dredge, post-dredge, total nitrogen TN at this particular station. And looking at dissolved oxygen concentrations at this station, pre-dredge and post-dredge, you can see some very low values of predicted DO in the pre-dredge concentration, pre-dredge configuration, and the post-dredge. There's less variability and higher average values of predicted levels of dissolved oxygen. So that's the kind of result that that we are looking for. Sykes Creek, up at the well within the Banana River region. So we have our total nitrogen, and the other major constituent here in the model, in the pre-dredge condition, is nitrate, nitrite. We'll just say nitrate, and lesser contributions from ammonium and dissolved organic nitrogen. So I can just flip back and forth between the pre and post-dredge prediction for total nitrogen, actually all of the constituents, and everything drops, all the forms drop to a lower concentration. And again, our monitoring station here is outside the footprint of the Muck zone, about maybe a kilometer away from the nearest footprint and several kilometers from the greater Sykes Creek model Muck zone. So that's interesting and useful prediction. And in terms of dissolved oxygen, I think Virginia pointed out the other day when I was showing the surface values of pre and post DO concentrations that this particular area has some of the lowest measured dissolved oxygen concentrations. So looking at the bottom layer of the model, layer 1, we have pre-dredge dissolved oxygen predicted concentration and post-dredge predicted dissolved oxygen concentration. You can see in the pre-dredge condition, in the bottom layer, the DO values are variable and bounce to fairly low values. We have this event, it's about a 2-month-long event, kind of in the middle of the model run. I don't, at this point, have a particular explanation for that, but it is a product of whatever is happening in terms of inflows from the watershed, wind conditions, water levels, all of that combining to produce this low oxygen event. And in the pre-dredge condition, values drop to just about 0 for a long period of time, with bouncing up to maybe 1.5 or 2. And in the post-dredge dissolved oxygen concentrations, that is mitigated a little bit, but still gets pretty low. So there's something going on in the model, maybe in the real world, that produced this low period of very low dissolved oxygen values. But there you are. In the post-dredge condition, we do have some improvement in the dissolved oxygen levels. And in the post-dredge condition, there's less variability in DO values and much more variability in the pre-dredge condition. So that's Sykes Creek. The final zone that we looked at in this phase of the project is the so-called boat ramp in the NIMS area. And we have our pre-dredge predicted array of nitrogen forms and nitrate dominating the total nitrogen, with a secondary contribution from dissolved organic nitrogen and ammonia. So that is the pre-dredge condition. And here is the post-dredge prediction for total nitrogen in the surface layer of the model compared to the pre-dredge condition in the surface layer of the model. And you can see a measurable reduction in the total nitrogen concentration in the surface model layer under the post-dredge condition. And our monitoring station is out here maybe half a kilometer or more from the actual dredging locations. And there are a number of flux measurements available to help set the flux from the sediment bed in the model from the Trefry and Fox studies conducted under this grant from the state. And the pre-dredge dissolved oxygen concentration in the model surface layer and the post-dredge concentration of dissolved oxygen, again, in the surface layer of the model, the upper 20%. And again, very typical of other areas. Once you perform the dredging in the model, you can see that there is an improved level of dissolved oxygen and the day-to-day variability is a bit less. What we're seeing here is output from the model at a 3-day interval. The model also produces output at just about any interval that you want, including diurnal variations, which are output in a much in a different output file. There's a lot of data in there, so it's hard to show it in a single plot. But anyway, the model is, I think, telling us that dredging in this area is going to improve the overall dissolved oxygen conditions, as well as reducing the total amount of nitrogen in the water column. So that's a quick overview of the 7 muck zones that we've addressed thus far. Some conclusions. I think that model experiments in all of the muck zones shows that dredging has the potential to reduce nitrogen-based nutrient concentrations in the water column outside the dredged area as well as within the dredged areas. And interesting conclusion from the model is that the muck zones tested can be broadly divided into 2 groups: those that are directly influenced by seasonally strong freshwater inflows, and other areas not directly influenced by strong inflows. And it looks like, at least in the model, the dominant forms of nitrogen differ between those 2 cases. DO value concentrations, DO concentrations were predicted to increase as the result of the reduction in nutrient concentrations by muck dredging in all the zones to a greater or lesser degree. So overall, the ongoing muck dredging program is predicted within the model to have measurable benefits in all areas investigated thus far in the study. Kind of a recommendation, ongoing sediment flux data collection in the muck zones, plan for dredging, and also as a background measurement in non-muck zones would improve the capability of the model to quantitatively predict the benefits of muck dredging. I have to say, I think a lot of people maybe in this group recognize that prior to this overall study, our perception of the distribution of muck in the IRL was literally totally wrong. It was 100% wrong. And thanks to the efforts of Trefry and Fox, we now have a pretty good handle on the distribution of the major muck zones, which are not as prevalent as previously thought, but some of the zones contain a lot greater thickness, overburden of muck, if you will. So our view of muck dredging and potential benefits has been changed and improved and optimized by this study. This is kind of a major advance, I think. Some next steps recommended by the county: model muck dredging in all areas that are funded in the plan to assess the cumulative improvements. So that's underway now. Extend the water quality model to chlorophyll A predictions. Well, it is outputting chlorophyll A concentrations now. However, we need to have the model better constrained at its boundaries by chlorophyll A measured data. We need more measured data to make this maybe more relevant to what we're trying to do. St. John's has done some of this work also, but to date, it's largely kind of hypothetical and is related to the next step on the list here is to adjust the swill nutrient loading by the anticipated improvements from funded upland changes. And then the final step, combine muck dredging and upland impacts to estimate total anticipated improvements. So this is kind of the end game to push the modeling effort to its limit, hopefully guided by continuing data collection to combine upland modifications, improvements under the TMDL program, and combine that with predictions based on the plans for continued muck dredging. And of course, as ever, thanking the County Natural Resources Management Department, Florida DEP, and ultimately the Florida State Legislature for providing the funding for this work. So there you have it.
Thanks, Gary. We have some questions. Jay Moynihan for Gary Zarillo.
Good morning, Dr. Zarillo. Going back to one of your earlier slides, in the Wabasso measurement of water levels, if I remember correctly, it showed sort of the fall being the points at which the levels are higher. And then if it was in the next slide, it showed that at this kind of the same periods of time that salinity went down, which was a little surprising to me, because I would think it doesn't, those two slides demonstrate that salt water from the ocean is coming in and pushing water levels up, and wouldn't that make salinity go up? Or is it causing a does the saltwater intrusion sort of cause a concentration of the fresh water over, closer to shore, so to speak?
Let me think about that for a second. The time frames here are a little bit different. 7/16.
Well, yeah, I mean, they are off a month or so, but it's...
Well, yeah, I don't know that I can answer that at the outset, but of course the salinity concentrations as well as water temperature are in the coastal ocean signal. However, when we have this very high amount of water level that propagates from the coastal ocean into the estuary, we're probably increasing the volume of water in the IRL by 50% or more. I would have to do just a point per point evaluation of that, but remember that in the fall, we're starting to reduce our evaporation rate. So I think we have to combine a number of processes to assess why salinities are either larger or lower. Of course, in this part of the year, in October, from late summer to October, we do often have higher freshwater inflows as well. So that could be a factor. So I think you have to put all those processes together and figure out exactly what the relationship is between changes in salinity and changes in water level. So I don't think it's a one-to-one kind of.
Oh, no, I'm sure there are many factors. I was just kind of struck by the fact that with the water levels coming up from what apparently is the coastal ocean, that the salinity seems to be lower. And I recognize you had the summer and the rains and, all those various things, but I just thought it would. Anyway, that's you answered my questions.
Yeah, that's a good question. If I had thought about that question ahead of time, I would have actually put these on the same scale and up in the same plot. And then we could see more precisely what the correspondence is.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, Vinny Toronto for Gary Zarillo.
Thank you, Dr. Zarillo. And so I'm going to start maybe on a basic level. I've really focused, and I think I understand most of this stuff. But so I just wanted to ask, the dates that you used throughout the whole time is 2016 and 2017, which are years ago. And that's, you're using those dates for the model because that's information we have that we could plug into this to the model. Is that correct? Did I understand that correct?
Yes, that's correct. The model, of course, is data driven, and the model is merely filling in the gaps between and among the data points.
Right.
And so for this particular time period, well, two things. One, The swill model is now updated to the close of 2017. It actually incorporates watershed conditions from 1995 to 2017. And so under this particular phase of the contract, Claudia Listipad updated to the close of 2017. And this is also a period where we were making more measurements of sediment nutrient flux to be placed in the model. So it was, in a sense, a more data heavy period. That being said, we are actually going to update this model under another project being done by the state, our enhanced inflow project. And we will update all of the inputs to the model through the middle of 2020, including the swill model and additional nutrient flux data. So there will be an update. So the model will, we're trying to keep up more or less with real time and update the model in 2-year intervals or 3-year intervals.
Okay, great. Yeah, I thank you. So I thought I understood that. And like most models, you have to have data. You have to feed it data in order to get data. And so it's based on what we have. Is there? I saw you saying the next steps is to incorporate some of the dredging we've already done. Is there? Maybe I'm trying to wave a magic wand in the air. Is there a way to take a look at an area we've dredged that we know the results of, like today, and compare it to the model? Or is that just an impossibility because just today we don't have the rest of the data needed for the model?
Yeah, you can do that. And I'm kind of urging the county and others to increase the monitoring, maybe on a quarterly basis, hit all of the muck zones that have already been dredged and are planned for dredging, and make some measurements of nutrient flux from the sediment bed. This will certainly improve the accuracy of the model significantly. The more data you have, the point I'm trying to make is that these sediment zones, I think I have maybe 24 sediment zones now in the model based on what we know about the distribution of muck deposits from the Treffry and Austin work. And one of the zones is the non-muck zone. And so, of course, there are more muck zones. And out of these 24 zones, we don't have sediment nutrient flux measurements for all of them. So I'm recommending that we hit all of these sites at least on a quarterly basis and start putting that data in the model, start refining and improving the resolution of the muck zones. And that will certainly provide us with exactly what you've asked for.
Okay.
One more thing, John. I'm sorry. I hit the
Okay.
button. So Virginia, I know we have money for monitoring in the plan. Is this something we could talk about, putting more resources into that? Just as a
Yes.
discussion. I'm not saying we do it, but that we could discuss.
Yes, so part of that is happening, and we would like more of that to happen. So we do have Fox under contract for some work, and we have Kevin Johnson doing some work at Mims and Sykes Creek. So yeah, we will have more data going forward.
Okay, great. Thank you. Sorry, John. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, and Charlie Venneau for one last question.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Zarillo, for the presentation. And maybe this is an obvious answer, but I'm just curious, for the reductions in total nitrogen and the increase in dissolved oxygen, are those numbers across the board statistically significant?
Let me think a second. I don't want to overstate. Well, the model, it's not a statistical model. It's a prognostic model in terms of physics and chemistry. So I would not say, because it's not a statistical model, that there would not be a purpose in doing analysis of variance or a t-test or something like that. The statistics that come into play here are looking at the statistical correlation between predicted and observed data that drive that, I would say that they're statistically correct in as far as the statistics support the accuracy of the model. If you go to the report, you can see that the water levels have a, relative error of, I don't know what it is, maybe 5% to 10%, an R-squared value between predicted and measured data of upwards of 0.9. The same for salinity and temperature. Salinity might be a relative error of 6 to 12%. Water temperature in the same range, and the direct linear correlation between measured and modeled water temperature and salinity data on the order of, again, 0.9 or so. So whether that carries over into the water quality data, we just don't have enough time series. So I haven't done a statistical comparison between predicted and measured water quality data. There would not be a point because we only have a few realizations of the water quality data. But I could do that. If you look at the literature, and this is kind of funny but a little bit sad, water quality modelers have often said, well, if you can get within 60% of the measured value, you're doing very well. Just to throw that out there. There's so many ways that you can adjust this model to create a match between measured and predicted water quality constituents, in particular, a lot of activity coefficients and other empirical coefficients that you can certainly make the model match pretty closely the measured water quality data if you have enough data. So yes, from a physical point of view, the model is statistically doing very well with a relative error of, let's say, 5 and 13% of measured and predicted values. In terms of water quality, I would not want to make that correlation at the moment, but at least it's the predictions are well within the ballpark. We're predicting very low concentrations of ammonium, for instance, a fraction of a part per thousand, and we're resolving small differences. So I would like to think that the predictions are qualitatively correct, if not actually quantitatively correct. But as we add more data into the mix, measured data, and create a better ability to calculate statistics between measured and observed water quality data, we can certainly put a error bar on that.
Great, thank you.
Okay, we're back to the meeting now, and I thought it might be handy if Virginia, could you share with us some of your thoughts about current water quality conditions now?
Can you see that screen?
We can, but you're in your in the view where you're seeing all the slides to the left.
How's that?
It's still we're seeing all the slides coming up in your presentation are all down the left side of the page. So you're in the pre-presentation mode.
Click from current slide, Virginia. It's on the left. What happens if you click that?
I just clicked it.
Yeah, we're seeing your other window.
Well, why don't you go ahead? We can see that slide, okay, I think, unless
Okay.
you're looking at this on a phone.
Yeah, so I just wanted to follow up Dr. Zarillo's presentation with these graphs. You've seen these before, but I asked Matt Battalato to update them. So we now have another 8 or 10 months of water quality monitoring data added to these graphs. And so just as a reminder, so this is you can see in the map in the upper right, the black dotted area is where the dredging occurred, and the yellow star is where St. John's River Water Management District collects monthly water quality data that is graphed here. We were looking specifically at turbidity, and you can see, why isn't this, it's not progressing. Let me see, maybe I picked the wrong screen or something. Is that any better?
It's the same as before. If you're going to advance that, you need to move down the page to the set that, yeah, that right there, move down to the next slide.
But I don't want to move to the next slide. I have animations that I'm trying to show.
I don't know. Maybe Vinny can help or somebody.
Yeah. Virginia, when you're sharing, what are you sharing, a screen or are you sharing the application? When you go down to share screen, the top row is sharing this in Zoom. If you go down to the share screen link, the top row is the monitors. It should say screen 1 or screen 2. Do you see that?
Yeah, so I thought I clicked on one of them the first time and I tried the other one the next time.
Okay, try it again. Let's see.
That's scary.
Yeah, so I've got screen 1, screen 2, or I have the slideshow, or I have PowerPoint.
Okay. But which screen is the slideshow on right now?
Well, it's on all of them.
Well, then just share them all with us. Come on, Virginia. No, I'm kidding.
I'm sorry.
Oh, you got it.
There
You got
That,
it.
okay. All right. Now let's see if I can progress. No. Why won't it?
If you click on the slide, it won't progress? Or the cursor key?
No.
One step.
Try left and right arrows.
Yeah, that's what I started with. I'm sorry. I thought I had this all set up to go right away. All right, so Vinny, if I select screen 2,
Yes.
can I then open?
Okay, then click the button on the bottom. Yep, you got it. Let's see what happens.
Okay.
It puts it.
Yes! Yay! All right, are you seeing what I'm seeing? So there's the April.
No, we're not seeing.
Oh, no.
No, it's okay. So go to end share up on, end sharing up on top, the Zoom bar, and then do share again, and now share the other screen.
How's that?
No, we still have the PowerPoint window, and that was the other screen. Because I still see your Outlook in the background.
That
No.
was screen 2.
Okay. I don't know what's going on. Click use presenter view. Let's see if there's an option on the far side. No, that's not doing anything.
From beginning?
You can try that, but I don't think it's going to display it. For some reason, it's not showing it. You might just need to give us a narration, but you could try to shut it down and try again.
Can I try emailing this to you
Yeah, of course.
very quickly? I'm sorry.
No worries. No worries.
All right, it's sent.
Okay. Yep. I'll catch it.
So I wanted to, while Vinny tries to pull that up, I wanted to do 2 things. Was to talk about the comparison that we've done pre-dredging to post-dredging using real water quality data collected by the Water Management District, and then also talk about the ongoing bloom. I know we talk about plan and we talk about projects, but we've got this bloom going on, and I thought it was important that we mention that.
I'm still waiting. A lot of people on the internet today, apparently. There it is. Okay. And you wanted to start at that, the graph,
Slide
right,
6?
Virginia?
Yeah,
Yes, ma'am.
slide 6.
Okay, share. Is everybody seeing it?
Yeah, we got you in side by side.
Okay. I think that's a preference thing. I think that's you
Okay.
changing your zoom.
All right. So now if you arrow forward, can you get the animations to work?
So I'm looking.
There you go. All right. So you see the turbidity increase during the 2011 super bloom. And Vinny, if you can just keep clicking. So click again.
I will. Let's do this. Whoever is a host, can you spotlight Virginia? That way you won't see me and you'll see Virginia's face.
Right. The March 2016 fish kill. Next. Hurricane Irma. Next. And then looking at the, keep going, Vinny.
Yes,
We
ma'am.
wanted to look at, well, what was the average turbidity before dredging? How did that change during dredging? And what did it look like after dredging? So now with over 2 years of post-dredging data, we're still seeing a 50% decrease in turbidity at that station that is out in the lagoon a kilometer or so away from where the dredging took place. Next slide. All right. So the Ogalley River, here's another project. This one was dredged by the Water Management District. Again, you see the super bloom in 2011, the fish kill in 2016, Hurricane Irma. The orange is the dredging. Go ahead, Vinny. The dredging window. So what was the turbidity before and during dredging was virtually the same, and after dredging was significantly lower. And we did run statistics on this, Charlie, and these numbers are statistically different. All right, next slide. So then when we go, Gary brought up seeing these changes in nitrogen and dissolved oxygen many kilometers away from the dredging project. So This station is at the Melbourne Causeway. It's about 4 miles away, sort of almost equidistant between the Ogalley dredging project and the Turkey Creek dredging project. And so even here, you can see significant decrease in turbidity post dredging that has continued for, in this case, almost 2 years. And in fact, back in October, there was the lowest turbidity recorded in the record for St. John's. So we can continue to do this as more projects are completed. The Cocoa Beach area, phase 1 is done, phase 3 is done. They're 60% of the way through phase 2. So when they are completed, we can begin to look at this. But you have to wait a significant amount of time after dredging to be able to have that data to take an average of to compare to the pre-dredging or the during dredging conditions. So it's not an immediate gratification in terms of being able to do the statistical analysis on, are we seeing the difference? So I think that's all I wanted to share following up on the muck dredging. In sort of the next steps, some of the question is, okay, so we see these changes near the dredging and within a few kilometers or miles from the dredging. How many areas do we need to dredge to add up to enough to cover something the scale and scope of the Indian River Lagoon? And so that's why some of those next steps are to look at all of the dredging that is funded in the plan and how does that affect the water quality, and then somehow look at not just in the sphere of influence of each of those dredging areas, but total across all of the grid cells in the model. Is there a net improvement there? So we will be working on that with Dr. Zarillo going forward. So switching topics, just to talk about the bloom for a few slides. So very, very thick, initially described as pea soup. I've seen it described with some other choice words that I won't repeat. And so this has been going on for about a month and a half now. It has looked this way. It is like this from the north end of the lagoon all the way down to around Ogalley in the Indian River. Also in the Banana River from 520 all the way to the north end, and particularly thick north of the Beeline, north of 528. Next slide.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we were over. I'll put it back up. I'm sorry, Virginia. It's my bad.
I'm sorry. I went back to slide 1, Vinny.
Yep, we're there.
So yes. So that's the marina in Titusville. All right, slide 2.
Yes, ma'am.
So this critter that is blooming, the dominant species is a cyanobium. That is a cyanobacteria. The state and researchers are working hard trying to get the exact species, but you can see that even in a scanning electron microscope image, which is what this is, it's a little round ball. There's no flagella, there's no hairs, there's no cilia, there's no great texture to the outside of it, there's no odd shape. It is just a round sphere, and there are loads of little round spheres about the same size. And so they're doing genetic work to try to identify what species this is. Next slide. And so what is the impact of that on our waterway? This is a graph, thanks to Jenny Hansen for pulling this data from the Water Management District's continuous monitoring stations. These are the dissolved oxygen levels, and you see, they're highly variable since this bloom really thickened up. and we go through these periods. The up and down is the, daytime, the algae is blooming and photosynthesizing and putting oxygen into the water. And then at night, it is respirating, it's using up that oxygen. And so we've been watching these nightly levels of oxygen, dissolved oxygen in the water. There are weekly coordination meetings with all of the related agencies on watch for the potential for fish kills and response. And so, when we get these levels below 2, that's when we really get nervous. So these are the continuous monitoring stations that the Water Management District has. The next 2 slides are the Kilroys, the continuous monitoring stations run by ORCA, the Ocean Research Conservation Association. And so, you see a very similar pattern with a few nights in a few locations dipping down around 2. In the next slide. We've particularly interesting has been down near Dragon Point, the station near Dragon Point being particularly low. And we did have a few dozen pufferfish reported in a fish kill earlier this week near the Ogalley Causeway, near Dragon Point. And so we are really, poised at the edge, and we could have conditions that where there is not enough oxygen for the marine life overnight. And so we've got a few more weeks of wet season to go. We have, it's warm, so the water doesn't hold much oxygen when it's this warm. Temperatures have cooled off a little bit this week. Hopefully we will pull out of this without a major event of this summer rainy season, but we are watching it closely, and it's it's not good out there. So I just felt like it was important to talk about that, and we can try to answer any questions. There may be people on the committee who know more than I do, but I thought it was important for the public to know, we're not just focused on the projects. The purpose of the projects is to try to not have this sort of situation during the wet, warm season each year.
Okay, anybody have any questions for Virginia? Vinny's got his hand up. Vinny?
I do. Sorry, I've got like 12 windows going on here. My question would be, so Virginia, I know after the fish kill, Keep Brevard Beautiful had helped a lot with the cleanup. And I remember when we first started our committee, one of the things we wanted to talk about was preparations in case there was an issue down the road. And I know you did work on that. I just didn't know if it would be beneficial to just circle back and make sure that everybody we talked to, what was that, like 3 years ago, is still at the ready. I just didn't know if that would be beneficial.
Yeah, so everybody is at the ready. We, the county has since gone out to bid to get that contract in place. We had piggybacked on a prior contract earlier to have, emergency provisions in place. We've now, gone the normal route and done an RFP. KBB was the winning bidder there, and so we will contract with them for the cleanup, and depending on the scale and what needs to happen, we'll be working with the agencies for KBB to be able to employ fishermen who are put out of work and whose work is hurt by fish kills, employ them to clean up the fish, and be able to have fish on their boats that are outside the slot limits that would otherwise violate the rules. But we want to get as much of that nutrient content and biological oxygen demand harvested out of the system rather than leaving those fish to rot.
Okay, I don't see any other questions. So, oh, wait, Laura Lee Thompson just raised her hand. Laura Lee?
I forgot my question. I'm getting senile. Let me think. I can't remember. I'm sorry.
It's okay. Anybody else?
John, there is an attendee with their hand up, but I don't know if we're taking.
No,
public
the attendees are only for during public comment.
Right, yeah, I just wanted to make sure you saw that.
Yeah,
Sorry
I
about
do.
that.
Thank you, Vinny. I appreciate it. Heads up are always appreciated.
I have a question.
Okay, who's got a
Kimberly.
question?
Kimberly Newton. Virginia, could you explain a little more about the fishermen taking those fish on their boat? What would be the purpose?
So they would be collecting the dead fish from the surface of the water to get them to harvest those nutrients out of the system instead of having the dead fish rot and consume oxygen and release nutrients back into a system that is already over polluted with those same nutrients.
Am I correct that I heard you mention like specs though on being able to use those fish for market, or what did you mean being able to have fish normally that they wouldn't have on a boat?
So when there is an unusual mortality event, when there is a fish kill, you get small fish, you get big fish, you get species that you're not allowed to take this time of year. And so, they need to be able to harvest whatever kind of fish is there and not say, well, we can take this one, but this one's too big, so we have to leave it in the water to rot.
Okay, so that would be a harvest prior, that would be like an immediate harvest, like as the morning is coming up.
Right. And there would be
Okay.
enforcement officers
Okay.
around, and we would be making sure that, everything was on the up and up.
Okay.
Okay, and Laura Lee, you're back on again.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify to Kimberly that this would not be a harvest for consumption. It would be they put up big dumpsters around. In fact, we have one at Wild Ocean Market at the port. And so the fishermen bring the dead fish and put them in a dumpster. They don't sell them to a seafood market.
Okay, yes, I just wasn't sure of the clarification of why, if they were there just to harvest the dead fish. It's good to know that FWC would be aware. I imagine there could be room for indiscretion there, so that's great.
Okay, anybody else? If not, Virginia, are you going to introduce the video?
Yes, Logan, if you can pull up the video. So this is for a stormwater treatment project that was just completed a few weeks ago in the Satellite Beach area.
Today we're actually installing a underground filtration system that's going to treat stormwater and base flow or water that's within the drainage system to remove nutrients before it goes into the Indian River Lagoon.
So the project's located on Jackson Avenue near Satellite Beach, City Hall, the new fire station that's going in, and the high school. We've used that property to install a solar panel to supply electricity to the pump that will run this system.
Basically, the way this system works is there is a submersible pump that is in this upstream inlet here kind of behind me. By being able to take water out of that inlet and then pump it through this filtration system, we're able to pump and treat water on a continual basis.
Projects are selected based on areas where our modeling shows that there's going to be a significant amount of nutrient load coming into the stormwater so that we can get the best bang for our buck as far as building these projects. We don't want to be cleaning already clean water. So So this particular site is taking roadway runoff, it's taking runoff from the city hall, the new fire station area, the school property, and some of the surrounding residential area, and it's going through the stormwater system past this project.
Whenever you are making a change to a drainage system, you need to be very mindful of what the potential upstream impacts could be. However, with this particular system, this is what's called an offline system, meaning that we're taking water from this drainage system, we're pumping it off, completely separate from the drainage system, providing treatment and then putting it back in there. Yesterday, they had built the chambers and everything that's going to house the media, and so today the media was delivered, and so they were installing the media inside of the chambers. ACF has this product called rain tanks, and they look kind of like milk crates. They're basically high void materials that we can fill with the media. And so what that does is it provides an area where we can put the media in there. We know the dimensions of it. And that allows us to ensure that we're getting the proper contact time of the water with the media as it's flowing through the filter. And so one of the benefits of materials like this is it promotes the colonization of beneficial bacteria, which really do the bulk of the work for cleaning the water.
The lagoon has an ongoing problem with too many nutrients as well as other pollutants being discharged into the lagoon and leaking in through the soil. From everybody fertilizing their lawn clippings, the leaking sewer lines, septic tanks where they occur, all of it needs to be reduced in order for the natural capacity of the lagoon and the organisms in it to take up those nutrients and grow in their natural fashion.
It's kind of a multi-pronged approach to address a problem that was created by multi-pronged pollution.
That was a nice job on that video. Thank you. Okay. I think, Virginia, we're all done with you, right? And we
Yes.
don't have any old business. We don't have any new business. So now we go on to public comment. And do we need to have that statement read again, or are we okay with encourage how the public participates? What do you think? Anthony, you want to read that thing again?
Yes. So it is time for the public comment. As a reminder, all attendees are muted and all previously raised hands have been lowered. You must raise your hand to be unmuted. People who have already spoken on a previous item may raise their hand again to speak to this different agenda item. For those participating via computer, attendees will see the raise hand tool at the bottom of their screen, and participants will need to select the participant's icon at the bottom of their screen. The raise hand tool is an icon at the bottom of the participant's window. For those participating via phone, dial *9. The meeting host will see a list of everyone who wants to speak and will unmute you. Your name will be called when it is your turn to speak. Please state your name and residence. The timer will sound at the end of your 3 minutes. Back to you, John.
Okay, thank you, Anthony. And I think we'll hold any committee comments until we're done with all the public comments. Okay. So let's start. First up is Lou Kontnick.
Am I unmuted now? Can you hear me?
You are, Lou.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, Lou Kontnick, and I'm with the Brevard Indian River Lagoon Coalition. I live here in Melbourne. And I just want to say that I am so enthusiastic about the COC process and all the good work that you do. The reports on the Dolphins and the Otters, terrific. And this last part for me was particularly interesting in terms of Dr. Zarillo's modeling, and then Virginia, on your comments relating that to the measurements and so on. One of the things that I have a particular interest in is in doing the posts every Friday on another project complete. And so I put those posts up every Friday, and they describe and celebrate projects that have been completed, both under Sorrel or if it's St. John's or others. And so what I realized today in the presentation was that I'm going to start going ahead and focusing not only on projects removing or restoring shoreline, but also on modeling and monitoring, because those things are very important for the overall restoration of the lagoon. So Dr. Zarillo, I'm going to be in touch with you, and Virginia, you know I've already been in touch with the county quite a bit. So that's my comment. Then I have one question, and that question is, well, I guess I have two questions. One, Dr. Zarillo, I'd love to get a copy of the report that you referred to. The second question is, Virginia, can you outline the time frame, the schedule for the review and then ultimate commission action on the 21 plan? What are the time frames there?
Okay. Virginia, do you want to handle that now, or should we wait till?
I think I can do it very quickly. So
Okay.
In November, the committee will meet and review the new project applications and indicate which of those they recommend going into the plan. Staff will then work with our consultant, Marcy Frick with Tetra Tech, to incorporate those into all the other plan updates. We'll bring the plan update to the committee in January. If they make that recommendation at their January meeting, we would take the plan update to the county commission in February. The county commission hasn't adopted a new schedule, meeting schedule for the 2021 calendar year, but it would, be the first or second meeting in February, depending on how all the dates align.
Terrific. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Lou. Mitch Roffer. And you need to unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I sent an email earlier in the week to the commission. I don't know if you've received it or not, regarding Blue Origins and their petition to change land use. Did you?
Yes, I got a copy of that, yeah.
Okay, good. So just briefly on the record here for this meeting, my concern is, in general, the easy approval of land use changes and the destruction of critical habitat. I think it would be nice to get specifics on these methods that these people who want to change land use, in this case, Blue Origins, but anyone who wants to do a land use change, particularly in critical habitat, I think we need complete environmental impact statements to be submitted to the appropriate boards, including the Citizens Committee, as well as the commissioners. I would like the commissioners, like you, to recommend the commissioners that every one of these land use changes is an environmental impact statement is needed and required for this to happen. We certainly need clear methods. What's being done to the land, what's being used around it, how are they truly mitigating the destruction of the critical habitat? What are they going to be doing to the land specifically? Will chemicals be used there? If they are, how is that wastewater being treated? Where will this water be released to after it's remediated? I just generically would like to see more information about this publicly available. If it wasn't for the Florida Today articles on this, I wouldn't even never have known about this land use petition change. I mean, I don't have the time to study the Federal Register every day or the Army Corps notices. I don't know if anyone who does. Perhaps if you have a big company or someone assigned to that, but certainly better public communication of what these are. And I certainly would like an environmental impact statement that's reviewed by the public and have a public forum on it to address some of the concerns in it. And that's all I have to say. Thank you, Carol.
Okay, thanks, Mitch. We'll get back to that just a second. I got one more public comment, and then we'll go back to the committee. Wait a minute, the public comment just went away. That was.
I just promoted Kurt Smith to panelist. Give him 1 second.
Oh, okay. I thought, wow. I thought I was going to be in trouble for cutting somebody off. And then we've got Kimberly Burns coming up after this. Just raised her hand.
Commissioner, are you there?
I am.
Oh, okay.
I've got you unmuted now.
Okay. I just wanted to say that this was a fascinating way to spend my Friday morning. I just, I revel in the fact that we have so many people that care about this lagoon, and we have so many intelligent people along with the others that, not that everybody isn't intelligent, but I mean to say that there are people that are involved with the scientific community that are studying this lagoon and giving us a path forward to get us where we need to go. And I would like to speak to Virginia off camera and see if we can't get some of this information in front of the county commission, perhaps in the form of a PowerPoint or something along that line. So that's what I had to say. And it was nice seeing all of you, even if it is on camera.
Thank you, Commissioner Smith. Kimberly Burns, you're on.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great. I'm just a citizen. I live at 3869 South Tropical Trail, and I've lived on the river for about 7 years directly. And first of all, I want to say, like the prior, I guess it was, what was his name? The person that just spoke?
Commissioner Smith.
Yeah, I just want to say I completely agree with everything he said. Thank you so much for putting all your time forward to correct all the issues that we have. And just from a citizen's perspective, it looks worse than it ever has. And all my neighbors and friends are worried about the Indian River Lagoon. So I'm definitely going to spread the word that you guys are, about the committee, this oversight commission that's been formed. Of course, until recently, I've been working, and you guys have been working for many years to get this stuff corrected. So I'm going to say things that I don't want to be taken negatively, because you guys have been working for years, and I'm just starting to listen in and participate. But some of the comments that I've gotten from some of my neighbors is, we were made aware that the septics are getting replaced through grants. So maybe some information on the criteria that's utilized when everybody's paying taxes, and we all kind of do our own responsibility. If you have a bad septic tank, then, you replace it yourself.
It might be for
So-
you. Hold on.
What? No.
I'm sorry.
So,
Somebody's talking on another line someplace, and so I'm not sure who's got their mic open.
oh, okay. So I just wanted to say there's some criticism that I'm hearing coming from that. That's, why should, when we pay taxes and we kind of take care of our own stuff, why is public works money being used to replace people's septic? Maybe more of a information on that. And then some of the data that I did see on the charts that were presented from the FIT seemed to be not, like I think one of your committee members said, there wasn't a large difference pre and post. But then again, I'm a layman. And is anybody really looking, because I know how much dredging costs, the cost benefits between, dredging and the benefit that it brings in the overall scheme. We all know nitrogen's definitely a factor from everything you guys have said and everything that we read, but it seems to be like the baseline that Meg was showing on the Dolphins. They baseline against Sarasota's flow of water in an open water flow. So it seems, I hear from a lot of people too, that isn't flow an issue that we don't seem to be addressing in anything that I've heard? How do we get better flow? And it kind of relates to what the gentleman before saying, that, we know the Space Center is affecting our rivers. You can't say it's not. I've worked out there almost my entire life. So I don't want to talk against it, but, is there anything we can do that will allow a better flow into the river so it's not so stagnant? Because you see this up north in lakes over the summertime. They all go green and they all go stagnant. So I'm done. Sorry.
Okay, thank you,
Charlie.
Ms. Burns.
Okay.
Okay, anybody, I don't see any other public comments. I'm going to close the public comment and come back to the committee. And on the committee, Charlie Venuto, you got your hand up?
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to Mitch's and the issue with the mitigation for the Blue Origin. So I don't know. I think Blue Origin and SpaceX and some of the other new space partners are a bit excluded from some of the normal NASA processes to do an environmental impact statement. So that, they have to go under the NEPA process, right? The National Environmental Policy Act, which drives the need for a NEPA project, or excuse me, an environmental assessment or an impact statement. And those are only apply to federal funded projects. And I don't think the Blue Origin would fall under that. I'm not 100% sure. I don't know their funding source. So technically, they may not be subject to an environmental impact statement or a EIS or EIA. But typically at KSC, when you do a new project, you have to submit what's called an environmental checklist, and that checklist is reviewed by NASA, and they make a determination as to what level of remediation or mitigation, if anything, you have to do. So I don't, it would be interesting to find that out. And I think we could make a better, a little better, have more knowledge about what's going on up there. So I just wanted to clarify that it may not be subject to an EIS because they're treated a little bit differently. They're, so-called outside of the gate of KSC, and they have a little more autonomy in what they do environmentally.
Okay, thanks, Charlie. Laura Lee Thompson.
I remember my question. So, Virginia, on the oyster reef projects, I know the algae bloom's been going on for like 6 weeks now. Has any monitoring been done, within the last couple of weeks to see whether the algae bloom has impacted the oyster reef projects?
I'm gonna defer to Jenny if she's listening and able to jump in. I'm fairly certain that some monitoring has taken place during this time frame, and I have not heard any losses, specifically reported. But
yeah, I was just about to quickly look at our August, September reports. If you give me just 1 second, I'll try to gather some better quick information. Just off the cuff though, I don't think that there's been an appreciable drop that we caught as there's a huge problem here in our oysters. So
and they're able to clam up at night and handle low DO, for hours at a time, as long as the dissolved oxygen levels recover the next day, which they have been. So I wouldn't anticipate any significant losses, but
and where we're seeing the lower, like the evening low DOs dropping, are more in the far north lagoon, and that's not where we have oyster projects right now. So with where we have our ability to gather data, there's also a bit of a data gap in our continuous monitoring locations from the water district and the Kilroys. So there's a little bit of lack of overlap on some of what we have for data versus where our oysters actually are. But in the area where they overlap, I'm not sure that we've seen any problem yet.
Okay. And Laura Lee, I believe that Harbor Branch is working on bringing some additional stations, continuous monitoring stations to Brevard that will help fill those gaps that Jenny just mentioned.
Great, thank you.
Okay, and I'm going to mention just for a second, I noticed that a hand just went up amongst the attendees. Public comment is closed now, and unless somebody on the committee makes a recommendation, we reopen public comment. I'm not inclined to do that. So I'm going to go on with the rest of the committee comments, and then we'll finish off our meeting with our last discussion item. So Terry Casto.
John, can I make a motion to extend the meeting?
Oh, is it that time already?
Yeah, it is.
Yes, second. I'm looking for a second. I'm not seconding the motion because I was chastised last month for seconding a motion.
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Okay, we extend for 15 minutes. So Terry?
So, yeah, so I need about 30 minutes to put my notes together and then another probably hour to discuss everything. Just a fun-filled morning. I want to talk specifically about Blue Origin, the concerns about that project, and to just notify you that the Marine Resources Council, under the leadership of Dave Botto and Joni Reagan, have been working hard on promulgating some guidance to state and local officials around the state, but especially in the county, on low impact development, LID, which is focused primarily on dealing with runoff issues. And as Mitch pointed out, and as other commenters have pointed out, you know, the Blue Origin project raises some of those very same issues. There's also the issues of destructions of wetlands and whether mitigation somewhere, you know, north of our county is a good trade-off for destroying wetlands within the county, or whether, you know, just wetlands in general, should we be allowing any destruction? So the bottom of maybe the sharp point of this message is we really need to change the focus of our planning boards and our county commissioners and the permit granting agencies from the feds all the way down to the local level, that we can't just keep doing what we've been doing for the last 50 years. We're dealing with those projects now, those problems. We've got, you know, close to 400 million that we're trying to spend to mitigate those problems. If we don't change the practices that created those problems, including the accumulation of muck, you know, we'll just be doing this, you know, we'll be going around this circle again 10 years from now. So LID, low impact development, keep that in mind. You're going to see a op-ed sort of piece in Florida Today in a not too distant future. That's basically encouraging citizens to get woke, right? Get acquainted with this issue and start making your voices heard with respect to how we deal with the development pressures. Development isn't going to stop. We don't want to stop development, but we need to do development in a smarter way going forward, or we will never get out of this environmental hole that we've dug ourselves in. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Terry. Todd Swingle.
Yeah, just a couple items on a similar note. You know, I agree with everything that Terry just said. I do think it's important. I do think this committee has some place in making our voices heard, but we've got to be cautious on that. You know, our committee was formed with a very specific purpose related to oversight of the public funds related to restoration of the lagoon. But I agree from the standpoint that Terry has, that that some of the decisions that are being made, if they are not consistent with the long-term sustainability of those actions that we're taking today, that it ends up being poor. Ultimately, it ends up being poor use of what is still public dollars, because make no mistake, the money that we're collecting is public dollars. So I think it's a fine line, and we've got to be careful. I don't think we have a position I don't think it's our place to weigh in on specific projects or specific issues, but to the extent that policy choices are being made that jeopardize the work that we're doing and the money that's being spent, I think it's entirely appropriate for us to understand that. But I would ask that this is something too, that as we do plan updates, that we understand if there's linkages and connections to the science basis for the plan that we're already doing. If there are policy choices that are being made that impact the the nitrogen contributors that we think that are have been identified as the main contributors to the health issues within the lagoon. The other comment I just wanted to make was about the statements on the EIS. EIS really does, that's the whole environmental impact process. There are 3 different levels. There are categorical exclusions, environmental assessments, and full-blown environmental impact statements. There are those are very much tied to the estimated impact of any project. Certainly federal funded projects all have to go through that process no matter what, but there are many other avenues that can require an EIS. And so through delegated programs like the NPDES program and the programs that the state has responsibility, if those do break those thresholds, then there are avenues to require it. So just because it's a privately operated facility does not exclude it from having to comply with those environmental parameters. It's just that they are implemented through delegated authority through the regulatory programs that the state administers. And so I just want to be cautious on that because it's not just a free pass since they're not a federal entity.
Thanks, Doug. Courtney?
Yeah, thank you. I agree with everything Todd and Terry just said. I don't think it is in the purview of the board to individually review land use changes of the county or, anywhere, any city land use changes in the county either. But I do think that we can be a driving force in policy. And I think, low impact development, things like that, changing the rules to, support what we do, because I agree a lot of our projects are basically correcting sins of the past, but we keep developing in the exact same way that we used to. And so I think that, we do have a responsibility to have a voice in regulations, policy, environmental preservation, and and how those policies impact what we do on a daily basis. So I think I agree that we should probably have a stronger voice in those decisions, but I would be very reluctant to get involved in the county's land use decisions. I just don't think that's the role of the committee. But I do think we can get involved in helping the county craft better policy to get better land use decisions. So I would like to see our board, talk about that more. I think now that we've gotten a lot of our projects underway and we've got a good set of data and information that we're working with, we will have some time to dedicate to that, in the future. So I'd like to see us go down that path if we could.
Thanks, Courtney. Lorraine?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Terry quickly, the low impact development presentation, where is that available for municipalities? Because if we don't want to directly address it, there are certainly many of us that could go to their to their city councils and request that those presentations be made and try to start there.
You should be able to find a link on the mrc.org website that will take you to that material. And there's been a fair, I don't know the complete list, but we MRC collaborated with about 20 other organizations and sent an informational letter with this background to, like I said, state and local representatives. Kurt Smith hopefully has seen that by now. So anyhow, if that doesn't work for you, ping me and I'll find you a better source. But you should find it on the mrc.org website.
Okay.
Laura Lee?
I'll make this quick, but this will give you some motivation because this just happened in Titusville. We had a developer that it's a big project on the south side of the Space Coast Regional Airport. And he had some wetlands that he wanted to put houses on. And so he went to St. John's and they mitigated, well, I don't know, I'm not sure what they did. I think there might have probably been some offsite mitigation in Volusia County for wetlands impacts in Brevard County, but he got permission to fill in the wetlands. They were just under 5 acres, 2 pieces. So he filled them in, and then he went to the Titusville City Council for a land use and zoning change. So those parcels were originally had a land use of open space and recreation, and they were zone conservation. So after he filled them in, they were no longer wetlands, and then they got the land use and zoning change that he wanted, so they could put a bunch of houses where wetlands used to be.
Okay, and Charlie Venuto.
Yeah, the mitigation banks, it's really hard now to get any land. I can tell you that from experience that we had at the visitor complex. And I think that's one of the reasons that Blue Origin had to go outside to Volusia County, that there either isn't anything available here in Brevard, or it's already been dedicated to somebody. So it is an interesting issue. I mean, I guess you'd have to look at it, if it's within the watershed of the lagoon, does it really matter where the mitigation takes place, if it's going to take place at all? I'm not supporting or against what Blue Origin's doing. I'm just, again, trying to provide that information, some background. And so Laura Lee, that company that did that project, I don't think they were subject to an EIS or an EA. I don't know if you know that or not, but I'd be interested to hear.
No, they weren't. I mean, it's just a private developer. So no, there's no impact study.
Yeah, and I think it'd be interesting, and I maybe could contact some of my former NASA colleagues to see if how Blue Origin works through their NEPA system at the Space Center. But I really don't think, I could be wrong, that I don't think they're subject to it. And if they are, then NASA, green-lighted the project.
So if I could just kind of butt in for a minute, when you're a private, property owner and you're going through a land use change, you do have to do an environmental assessment as part of your land use change, especially if it's vacant property and it was never developed before. So if they are developing on property that, is currently vacant and was not impacted by development previously, they would have to include that in their land use change. That's state law. So that's part of Chapter 163 of comprehensive planning. So, and that's, if they have wetlands, they would have to provide a wetland survey, analysis of the vegetation and the wildlife and all of that stuff. So that is a requirement.
Courtney, while you're there live, you want to make a motion to extend the meeting 15 minutes?
Oh, sure. I'll make a motion to extend the meeting for 15.
And can somebody else second that?
I'll second.
Okay, second. Everybody's in favor. Aye. Okay, we're going for 15 more minutes. No more motions to extend the meeting. And so I think we've kind of beat this topic a bit here. I see Terry's got his hand back up again. Last hand, Terry.
Yeah, just I need to correct that the reference I gave to Lorraine. It's savetheirl.org. MRC.org is going to take you to someplace you don't want to go. Savetheirl.org. And LID is prominently displayed there.
Okay, thanks, Terry. And so there's been a fair amount of discussion here. Is there any action that we need to take on this item? There is no item before us. Does somebody think we need to make some sort of motion, or can we move on to the final comments by the chair and the committee?
I would just, I would like the chance to just maybe talk to Virginia to see about how to move some of that forward, if possible, and we'll bring it back at another meeting.
Okay. Is that all right with everybody? The consensus? Any objection to that? And so, Courtney, you can chat with Virginia and bring this back when you're comfortable.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So we're done with general public comments. Final comments by chair and committee. We have a meeting format change apparently coming up. And let me close this thing off here. Oops, that's wrong. Okay, I need to mention again, people have raised their hands in the public participation section, and we're closed with public participation. And so I'm not going to address any of the hands that are in that section. Okay, where was I going? Oh, yeah, this meeting format change. Apparently, we're going to have to meet in person, which is very distressing to me. I for the last, I don't know, since March the 8th, I've been holed up in my home here. It's a very nice home, but it feels like prison. But I've been doing that to avoid contracting a disease which is killing people. And I am very reluctant to attend a meeting in public in Brevard County with the number of people who are discounting or ignoring precautions being recommended by CDC and others. Apparently, this next meeting is going to be very important, and we're not going to be able to do it by Zoom. And I think the Zoom meetings have been working out okay. But I wonder if, Virginia, can you give us any update on what your understanding is of the meeting and how we go forward? And once you do that, I've got some recommendations. If we have to have the meeting in person, then I'm going to make some other recommendations. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, my understanding is that we do have to have at least a quorum of the committee present in person. But the county can support a hybrid type meeting if the committee wants to come up with some way to ensure that at least a quorum is present. Then we could have everyone else participating via Zoom. We can have that Zoom link available to the public as well so that they can participate either live or virtually to reduce the numbers. We currently have the Florida room reserved. We could try to change to the board chambers, which is a slightly larger room, but I think depending on how many committee members want to be present, there's better spacing for committee members around the table in the Florida room.
Virginia, what is our quorum?
It would be 4 out of 7 voting members.
Okay, and if you could all do the hand raising thing again, Vinny?
Yeah, I think, John, I think this is where you were going to go. I really would recommend we do a hybrid and that we encourage the audience attendance to use the Zoom link. And I would volunteer, I can talk to John Lesner, and we can volunteer to be, I would volunteer to be one of the lanes. I think if we have 4 people sitting at the table at the least, lanes, and then everybody else or the alternates on Zoom, I think limiting the number of people there will greatly increase the chance of not contracting COVID. So I would volunteer to be there.
Okay, so we would need at least 4 people. Now, this gets to be confusing to me somewhat in that, for example, if Terry Casto and I, if neither one of us wanted to attend in person, or if just Terry wanted to be in person and I wanted to be on Zoom, how does that go for counting who's participating? Is Terry the voting member there in the room at that time? Or am I the voting member online? And I don't care about being the voting member necessarily. I'm more concerned about we don't foul the process up, because this will be an important discussion items going on during this meeting.
I don't believe the governor's executive order says where votes count, whether they're virtually or in person. You just have to have a quorum in person. Okay.
I know the city of Melbourne has, and one of the boards I meet on, I'm not allowed to participate. They've actually banned the Zoom meetings now, and you have to go in person to attend those advisory board meetings. Jay Moynihan, you got your hand?
Well, I just wanted to kind of chime in, John, to echo all the comments you made at the outset of this issue. For a lot of reasons, I would not attend a meeting in person at this time.
Okay, thank you.
next week or next month, don't expect to see. I mean, I'm happy to be there on Zoom, but not in person.
Yeah, me too. Same thing. Okay, Lorraine.
I was just gonna say it. I was just gonna ask how many could be there. I would volunteer to be there as well. So that's 2. And if we have 2 other members that would be there to meet the quorum.
Okay, hold on. Stephanie?
Yes, I'm willing to be in person as well.
Okay, so
And
that's
the
3.
way what you were describing to begin with, it would be my thought that there have to be 4 voting members. If you are attending the meeting and Vinny is attending the meeting, you are the voting member. And so you can attend, not in person, and still vote, but you would not count for the 4 that we need for the quorum. Does that make sense?
It does, but I'm not a legal authority.
Yeah, I think that that's the way it would play out. I think that's what Virginia is saying. You've got to have 4 of the actual voting members. And if you are attending, not in person, you count as the voting member.
Okay. Courtney?
I was just going to volunteer to attend in person as well. I can do that. I prefer if everybody was wearing masks, but I can attend in person.
Okay. And
I'll definitely wear a mask everywhere I go.
And Terry?
I know there are people, Courtney being one of them, that are sensitive to the charter of this committee. But I think a strongly worded letter objecting to this executive order, risking the lives of these citizen volunteers, is more than warranted.
Terry, I understand that, and I felt the same way, but we're all volunteers, and I'm sure the response might be, well, you're a volunteer, you don't have to serve on the committee. And so, it's not, I agree with what you're saying, but I can imagine what the response would be.
So if the governor tells you that you got to show up in person or you have to resign from the committee, what are you going to do, John?
I don't know.
It's not a fair question, but it's just, this sucks.
If it was today, I would say I'd resign from the committee. I'm not sure. November 20th is our next meeting scheduled date, I think. And I doubt things are going to improve significantly between now and November 20th in Brevard County. I don't know. I would prefer to do Zoom, is all I can say at this point.
Well, I'm going to be on travel, so much as I might consider backing you up, I'm not going to be here.
Okay. And Stephanie, is this your hand up new or is this from before?
It's from before.
Okay, thank you.
I think
I don't have any other hands up. So Virginia, do you have enough input from us to proceed forward with the next meeting?
I think we've got 4 people who can vote. I believe, Vinny, that John Lesnar will not be participating, so you would be representing that lane as the voting member. So I guess if everybody could, I've tried to take notes. There are a few people that haven't chimed in. So if you could let us know whether you plan to attend in person or not, we will then maximize the spacing amongst the seats for the number of people that are anticipated to come in person. The seats for the audience will be spaced, at least 6 feet apart, and we'll have them, at the back of the room, well distant from the round table for the committee.
Okay, and I think at our next meeting, are we due for quarterly reports? Could I make a recommendation in an attempt to keep the meeting absolutely to a minimum amount of time, that we skip the quarterly reports for next month? And I'd like to see what the rest of the committee has to say about that. those can take a fairly long period of time. I would appreciate getting the hard copies of the reports, but I'm not sure we need the presentations. And so I've got Stephanie with her hand up. Stephanie?
I wanted to speak to both of those issues. To me, I don't see that there's any absolute need to have a public audience unless that's part of the prescription that has been handed down to us. So if we have 4 people in the room or maybe 1 or 2 more attendees in person on the committee, the remainder of the group could be in another location and they could weigh in virtually. And again, that would limit the amount of exposure that the committee members would have. And I agree with you. I think if we could postpone, make the meeting as short as possible just to handle the business that is absolutely necessary for that particular meeting.
Okay, and Courtney?
Sorry, I had to unmute. Yeah, I agree. Let's just get written reports for that meeting and, have as much time as possible to talk about the project. So I think that's a great idea.
Okay. And anybody else? All right, Virginia, are you okay with that? And, I'm hoping that, we can get enough done in November that we may not need to have a December meeting. And then we can address the January meeting at some later point.
Right. So we will bring a meeting schedule for 2021 to the November meeting so that you can go ahead and act on that and not need a December meeting. I'm not anticipating any business needed in December, and we won't schedule anything extra in November. We'll just stick to the business that needs to happen.
Thank you. That's great. Okay, and Stephanie, you got your hand up?
Yes, I just had the question about whether the participants have to be in the room or not. Do you know that?
I do not. Christine, are you? Oh. Our attorney, I saw her, she was here for part of the meeting, but we may have lost her by now. I can seek clarification on that. I had also asked about whether the public had to be accommodated in person or whether that could remain virtual. The initial response from the attorney's office was they thought it probably did include allowing the public to participate in person, but I didn't get a final answer. So.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, we've got 2 minutes to 12. Are we done with the final comments by the chair and committee? Anybody else have any other comments? Okay, I don't see any. Virginia, was there anything else you need from us at this point?
That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you for a great meeting that I thought was going to be over at 10. I see I'm 2 hours off in my estimate. Agendas are very deceiving things. I really thought we would be done early today, but I guess not. Thank you all. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Thank you, John. Good meeting.
The opinions expressed by any member of the public during any period of public comment do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, or the program sponsor, and are solely those of the presenter. The Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, and the program sponsor hereby expressly disclaim any and all responsibility or liability for any defamatory or slanderous statements expressed by any member of the public during any such period.